Good morning, everybody, and another warm welcome to this council meeting, which is going to be a very interesting one, to be fair. So welcome councillors and staff to the public who may be watching this live stream or on later on. Also welcome to media, and in saying that, I want to congratulate Wyatt Ryder, who's in the chamber with us, who works for the ODT and Oamaru Mail. Congratulations on your award, Wyatt. Best journalist in the world, I think it was, pretty much. So congratulations on that, but also just acknowledging this. Is this maybe your last council meeting with us? Oh. Yes. So all the best as you head off to your new horizons. So thank you very much for the relationship we've had over the time you've been here. Right, councillors.
Politicians before media.
Kiss of death. Okay, no, thank you. Right, we go to the agenda now. So do we have an apology for Councillor McCone? Are there any other apologies? No, someone like to move? We accept that one. Councillor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Halele. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Ryan.
Just declaring a conflict of interest in item 7.9. To manage that conflict, I won't be voting on that matter.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Halele.
I'd just like to register my conflict of interest with item 7.12. I won't be taking part in the vote, but there may be aspects of the discussion that I'll take part in.
Okay, thank you. Right, anything else? Okay, thank you very much for those. Okay, now the agenda, as I said, is going to be an interesting one. We are going to be skipping backwards and forwards a little bit because we've got people coming in for certain items, and we've had to give them some times to come in. So, councillors, you've got an indication of how long some of these items need to take, but if you can just be mindful of, I'll be trying to keep to the times as much as possible so that we can have proper debate, but also that we aren't keeping other people waiting longer than we perhaps have to. So going on to public forum, I think there's no registrations for public forum.
Minutes will be deferred to the 11th.
There's no confirmation minutes. They'll come to the meeting on the 11th. So we'll go straight to item 7.11, resolution to receive or defer a late agenda item, which that is the one on Waitaki District Health Services. So that is on page 225. Someone happy to move that? Councillor Holding.
It's an option.
So you're moving. So we've got two options there. You can either accept or defer. So if you just say which one you're moving. Councillor Holding moving to accept the late agenda item, and Councillor Hopkins seconding that. Any discussion on that? Okay, I'll put it. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Right, we will now go straight to that agenda item, which is 7.12, and it is one of the most significant agenda items we will have. Full stop. Where we're looking at the future of Oamaru Hospital. So with that, we'll hand to Mr. Parmley, who's been charged with negotiations over this past couple of months, to introduce the report.
Thank you. So yeah, this is listed as approval of a major transaction, but it is relate to transfer of Oamaru Hospital services from Waitaki District Health Services to Health New Zealand, to Whatuora. And I'd like to start really with an apology. And it's an apology to our community that we haven't been able to consult with them on this matter. And every community feels a sense of strong ownership of its local hospital. But in Waitaki, given the history of the hospital and the community's role in saving the hospital 25 years ago, there's an even stronger bond and sense of ownership by our community over their local hospital. And it was our full intention to consult with the community on the proposals ahead of any decision. However, unfortunately, if the transfer is to proceed and services protected, there's now no time for the council to consult. A decision needs to be made today to enable that transfer to take effect and protect those services to our community. So I do apologise that we haven't been able to engage with and consult our community on this matter. I'd also like to just say a few thank yous as well. So it became apparent in March that Waitaki District Health Services would not be able to provide services beyond the end of June with the financial pressures, the pressures on health, and the notice not to renew the contract. Since then, there's been an immense amount of work undertaken to agree an approach to transferring services smoothly that protects the services and the loyal and hardworking staff that provide them. These sorts of negotiations usually take a lot longer than the 2-month window that we were provided with. And I'd really like to thank the team at Waitaki District Health Services, Health New Zealand, Anderson Lloyd, as well, and for the support of the council team here for dedication and sacrifice of many evenings and weekends in getting to this point. In terms of council's role, council is the owner of Waitaki District Health Services, and so we haven't been the main party to the negotiation. We played a supporting role in this. The main negotiations and the main agreements are between Waitaki District Health Services and Health New Zealand. So Waitaki District Health Services is a separate legal entity, an organisation that owns and operates Oamaru Hospital, and therefore that's why the main negotiations are between Waitaki District Health Services and Health New Zealand. Council's role has been supporting these, advocating for the community, and has clearly got an interest and has sought, through this process, not only to protect the hospital and services and staff, but to secure the commitment of Health New Zealand to work with the local community and stakeholders, including the council, to secure improved access to health and better health outcomes for the local community. I think it's important in this process to recognise that change is needed, as some of the demand and financial pressures on Waitaki District Health Services over the past few years are attributable to some aspects of the local health delivery that aren't working as well as they should be for our local community, and some parts of our local community are particularly impacted by this. So principally, council's role here today is as the shareholder of Waitaki District Health Services to approve the decision made by the board last night, which constitutes a major transaction to transfer services to Health New Zealand and to lease the hospital buildings. So briefly, the structure of the deal has a number of components to it. So the sale by Waitaki District Health Services to Health New Zealand of business activities and clinical and operational assets in order for Health New Zealand to provide services. And the sum in there is for 1.25 million to reflect the value of those. As part of this, there is the offer of employment to all staff by Health New Zealand on similar terms and conditions to what they are on currently, and the lease of hospital buildings by Waitaki District Health Services to Health New Zealand for a commercial rent. To satisfy the council's concerns for the future of health and the involvement of the community in reshaping health services to better meet community needs, there is also a letter of comfort from the Chief Executive of Health New Zealand setting out a number of commitments to engage with the community and the council to improve access to services and improve health outcomes. Also, a component of this is that council has lent to Waitaki District Health Services to support its financial position. And so there is a loan outstanding that's detailed there in the report. So as part of the proposals, it's recommended that the loan is restructured to a longer term arrangement and this will ensure the council is repaid, the ratepayer is no worse off, and Waitaki District Health Services, which will be effectively become a landlord company if this is agreed, can meet its obligations as a landlord in a financially sustainable way. I'd like to draw your attention to a number of the attachments. So at the start of this process, council requested an options assessment for health in the district, and this was undertaken by PwC with the engagement of some stakeholders and partners. And this is attached in the report packet attachment 3. And whilst this shows there are no immediate options, there are other examples from around the country to draw upon, offering potentially different approaches to health provision to meet community need. Council doesn't need to choose an option today, and it's not clear that any of these options can be directly applied to Waitaki, but there may be elements of them that are applicable. So instead, it's suggested that this report is noted and it feeds into the Health Futures project work, should Council agree to the recommendations today. And on that note, I'd just like to thank PwC for their work and for those that have contributed from the district to that report. Draw your attention to attachment 1, which is the letter from the chair of Waitaki District Health Services requesting council support as the sole shareholder, the transaction to transfer services from Waitaki District Health Services to Health NZ. This decision was made by the board last night and underlines that this is their decision to make, and council's role is to decide whether to support that decision or not. And attachment 2 is the letter of comfort from the Chief Executive of Health New Zealand, giving commitments on the future of health and the community and council's role within that going forward. Finally, in terms of the overall recommendations, council agreed some objectives in relation to this matter. If it was to agree to the transfer of services from Waitaki District Health Services to Health NZ. These included preserving the hospital and associated services within Oamaru and the Waitaki District, ensuring that the Waitaki ratepayers were no worse off, and securing commitments and engagement of the council and community in developing the healthcare system going forward. It's recommended today that you support Waitaki District Health Services' decision to transfer services and lease the buildings to Health New Zealand, as these proposals meet the council's objectives. Happy to answer any questions or for Mr. Hope to add anything in that I missed.
Did you want?
No, I don't have anything to add at the moment. Happy to answer a question.
Just before I go to questions, I do want to take the opportunity at the front of this session to recognise all the work that has gone into this, and listening to Mr. Palmley's apology to the community. I think that's something that we all share in, and it's something where we did want to engage with the community as much as possible, but the timing of everything just isn't going to allow that. And we hope to make as much information possible available as possible along the way in different media. But special thanks to Alex and to Paul Hope, who've been at the forefront of our negotiations or discussions or participation in negotiations with Health New Zealand and Waitaki District Health Services, and all of the people who have been supporting that. It's very much appreciated. As the governance team, we've obviously been privy to a number of briefings along the way, getting updates of on the negotiations and also setting some direction for those, but the heavy lifting's been done by others, and I just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge the work that was done as recently as Friday and then Saturday and Sunday over this last weekend, and last night with the governance advisor getting the report sent out. I think it was getting pretty close to 11 by the time that came out. So thank you very much to everyone who's put in some very long hours on this one on behalf of the governance team. It's very much appreciated, and I think you've got us to as good a position as we could hope for given the circumstances. So anyway, we'll go to questions. Councillor Hopkins.
So two, one's a pretty minor technical one, but on attachment 1, which is a letter from the chairperson of Waitaki District Health Service Limited,
looking at the approval of transaction, I'm just, forgive me, this is probably my unfamiliarity with tenancy and property matters, but if I look at 6, please also confirm that council consents as head landlord to the lease from the company to HNZ and will sign the consent contained within the lease prior to settlement of the transactions. Can somebody just explain to me what that means? I hadn't realised that we were head landlord.
I'll go that first. So, council owns the land on which the hospital buildings sit. And Waitaki District Health Services leases that land from the council, but Waitaki District Health Services owns the buildings. So in leasing those buildings to Health New Zealand, as part of the terms of the agreement, they have to lease the land. They need our consent as the landlord, and we cannot unreasonably withhold that consent.
My second question, just putting myself this morning in the position of a member of the public concerned, I'm interested in this matter and watching on. I'm wondering if we have adequately explained why the decision has to be made today. And I'm wondering if some amplification of that might be of value to people outside this room who are perhaps coming to the nitty-gritty of this decision for the first time. So very explicitly and clearly, why do we have to reach finality today?
Mr. Conley.
So from the 1st of July, there's no contract in place for the provision of health services at Oamaru Hospital, and Health New Zealand have decided that they will not renew that contract. The background to this is that there's been considerable pressure on the health system generally, but more specifically locally, and Waitaki District Health Services within that contract have not been able to meet all of their costs, which sort of brought things to a head. If we are going to transfer on the 1st of July, which seems like a long way away, there is a lot of work to do, including transferring of staff from their contracts with Waitaki District Health Services to Health New Zealand and meeting statutory requirements on that. So that process needs to start tomorrow if it's going to happen for services to be still in place on the 1st of July, but operated by Health New Zealand.
Just slightly further on that, just to clarify, there's a period of notice that has to be given to staff, and that period is tomorrow. So there can't be a delay, and fundamentally there isn't money to run the hospital after the 30th of June. I'm just repeating that part because it's really sets the context to a whole lot of the discussion and the negotiations that have been had. But having said that, obviously we've had our goals that we do have, keep the overall level of service that our hospital offers, and that staff are looked after. And I think we've achieved that as much as we possibly can through the negotiation that's happened. Other questions, councillors? I think we've been well briefed on this, and one of the things that, as I said before, we do want to make sure that we share as much information with the community so that they've got everything to explain the case and the outcomes that we've achieved on this one. If there are no other questions, I'd like to move the recommendations from the chair. Most of them are all part of the negotiation, and it's kind of a package deal, but there is one aspect there which is more up to us, and that's number 5, which is the loan of around $2 million the council has to the hospital company. So the hospital company will still belong to council. It's the assets and the staff within that transfer over. So the company will still be there. It will be leasing the property and to Health New Zealand, but it will also have that debt of around $2 million to us. rather than the recommendation which says minimum period of 10 years, so I'd move that we set the term loan to 3 years, with the understanding that if the hospital company needs a letter of comfort along the way, or if it needs to extend the loan, then they can do that. But it just puts a more finite time on it. So that's the intention there, and if it can be repaid in that time, then that's good, and we get that money back in, which is currently borrowed externally. Do I have?
Sorry, Mr.
Yep.
What are your proposed? What is your proposed wording change for 5? And
So it's very simply that approves a change to the terms and conditions of the current funding advance to Waitaki District Health Services that would convert this to a term loan for a period of 3 years, secured by the buildings and other assets, etc. So it's just changing that term.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Hope, I was wondering if you had through this process, obviously there's been a lot going on, so it may not have been lined out, but is there an estimated annual kind of cost to what will be the new kind of function of Waitaki District Health Services going forward, in and around their maintenance costs and so forth?
Yes, certainly. The Waitaki District Health Services has made available the sort of the financial modelling that they've done to determine whether they would be a concern post the transaction, and in that, was included what was seen as sort of reasonably foreseeable costs, including quite a reasonable maintenance budget for the buildings, given that there has been some pressure on. Well, we've talked about the pressure on their funding, so some of the maintenance may not have been sort of performed to the level that I think the company was comfortable with. So that is all included. So we understand sort of the cost structure that we expect for the company. Sorry, if you're asking sort of what does that cost structure look like? Probably it really depends in large part on the terms of the loan we settle on and how the company is supported going forward. It will still need to operate, it will still need to maintain the buildings, and still need to do things like prepare annual reports and other financial transactions and these sort of matters that we'll need to work through in detail over the next couple of months. So
supplementary to that, would you say, in a principled sense, that principal repayments over 3 years could have the potential to put pressure on the modelling that's been undertaken?
Yes, I think it would. They were probably expecting a slightly longer term than that, but as the Mayor addressed in his comments, there is always the opportunity to come back and talk to council once more of those matters have been worked through about whether it could be fully repaid in that period. But as a CCO, they may look to secure other avenues of finance, because they will have a sort of guaranteed income stream for certainly the first 10 years of the lease, and they might find it more appropriate to go out and raise commercial funding.
I'll ask for a seconder. Councillor Hopkins.
Mayor, I'll second that, but I want to ask a question in the process of doing so. My understanding was there's been some discussion as to the possibility of the recommendations that are to be put to us this morning and voted on being put on the screen for members of the public who are, again, relatively new to this matter and learning an awful lot in a very short period of time. That doesn't appear to be the case. So I'm just wondering, I do believe it's important that people hear what we are voting on or are made aware of the wording. I think if the recommendations aren't going to be shown on screen. I think they should at least be verbally listed.
Okay, Mr. Palmer's just working on whether he can do that from his device. Just, yeah, it should say that, add to that to the public. The information is on our website. It's under the meetings agendas, and this particular report is an agenda addendum rather than the agenda which went out last week. So because it was a late item, it was done separately, but that is available there. And yeah, we're basically we'll see how Mr. Palmer's going.
I've got it in the document.
Send it.
I'll just send it to you.
Yeah, so we'll work on that, but we can carry on discussions along the way. Essentially, the recommendations or the motion as it is now, basically along the lines of what's been talked about so far. So, councillors, comments. Councillor Thompson.
So can I just ask then, Mr. Mayor, that are we going to vote for the recommendations in their entirety or going through them 1 to 6?
I'll get a feel from councillors as to whether they want to vote differently on any particular one of them, but yeah, otherwise we'll put them as a whole if people feel comfortable with that. Councillor Blackler.
Yeah, your earlier comment about 1 through 4 and 6 being a kind of package deal and 5 separate. I wouldn't mind if they sat like that personally.
Okay, those girls. Do you wish to make an amendment to number 5?
I just feel that a shift from 10 to 3 is, quite a big jump. I personally would feel a bit more comfortable if that number was 5.
Okay, yeah, just to explain my reasoning is basically if the company will have some costs, it will still have some accounting costs. There will be a change to the structure, how it currently is. So some costs will be reduced in some of the overhead. And obviously it won't be running the function of a hospital anymore. It'll be just simply running a property. The expected revenue over the 3 years, by my calculations, is over $4 million. And whilst some money may be needed for, well, almost certainly will be needed for refurbishment and so forth of the buildings, we don't know how much that's going to be. The backup is that the company can come to us and say, actually, we need longer. We're not in a position to repay, and it'll be reporting to us every 6 months, and we will know what the situation is well in advance of the 3 years being up. So it's the reference you made before was paying it off over 3 years. My understanding is it's payable in 3 years' time. I'll just check with Mr. Hope what the situation is. What's the basis of the loan?
Well, I think, yeah, that was, again, this was just a broad agreement, and it's, I would have thought it'd probably be a combination of both, probably not a straight table mortgage, just looking at what the income flows will be, but it's perhaps sort of lump sum repayments at the either 6 month or annual anniversaries of it. But I mean, that's really something that we'd sort of negotiate with health services to make sure it's achievable by the end date that councillor set out.
If it's a sticking point, well, the reason I've said 3 is it puts the impetus on them to get it paid off and get ratepayer money back into paying off some of our external debt. If councils are happier with 5, and if the seconder is happy with that, then I'm fine with moving it to that.
Yes, Mayor Chair, I think having listened to the conversation, I would probably prefer 5 to 3.
Okay, so we'll make that 5. Thank you. Any other discussions on it? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, I think this is a monumental and momentous decision, which has it is not a decision of our making in the sense that we didn't initiate this. It's arisen out of a decision by Health New Zealand not to renew the contract, although correspondence would suggest that perhaps the board of Waitaki District Health Services did initially suggest consideration of reintegration as a solution to its funding challenges. Health New Zealand, of course, has said that they think the level of funding here has exceeded that made available to similar rural hospitals for similar types of services. There is a conflicting view that this hospital has probably endured or paid the price of not having enough funding over the years. Those are matters that are now historic, and we have to actually optimistically hope that returning to the within the framework of the Health New Zealand structure will actually continue to perpetuate good quality and wide-ranging health services. I can remember, I wasn't living here at the time, but coming down to take part in events here, I can remember the intense passion associated with the closure of the old hospital and the desire to see this new one set up. I mean, it absolutely, totally galvanised the community, and Waitaki District Health Services has served its community well, and the hospital has served its community well in the interim, or from that point onwards, and we must thank everyone who's been involved with that. I think the thing that I take most heart in and most comfort in is a comment in the letter that you've tabled as Appendix 2, second paragraph. Health New Zealand, Te Whatu Ora, is committed to the delivery of health services to the people of the Waitaki District. We will work in good faith. And I place a great deal of emphasis on those 3 words. We will work in good faith to ensure that health services in the Waitaki District are delivered to best meet community needs. And that echoes an earlier commitment equally made, or also made, in other correspondence by Health New Zealand. And I take real comfort in that, and the fact that they go on to say we will engage with the Waitaki District community on these matters, that is to say, the delivery of health services that best meet community needs in partnership with the council. So although change is always discomforting and concerning, and although there's always a risk, and certainly in this case, the risk of loss of control from our own CCO, council controlled organisation, back to the Health New Zealand infrastructure and entity, I think we just have to actually accept that the parties are committed to have worked together or have worked in good faith, and are committed to working together in good faith in the future. And I just think it'll be our duty to hold everyone to that, and in the process ensure the best possible outcomes, or the best or ensure health services that are delivered to best meet community needs going forward.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? Oh, Mr. Harley, do you want to?
I was just going to add, in terms of that accountability mechanism, one of the things you'll see in that letter is a commitment to an annual report to come to this council on, health services and health outcomes within the district, which I think, will be a good mechanism for this council and this community to see and understand, how services are performing and whether some of the challenges that are there within the health system are being dealt with.
Okay, there's no one else. I'm just just add a couple of things and, one is that, I don't think we'd be as comfortable making this decision if we were still working under the DHB regime where the regionalisation of funding made things very difficult. We now have a national system that hopefully our hospital will sit well within. Do want to acknowledge the feedback, the limited feedback we have had from the staff is that they are actually very much for going back under the Health New Zealand umbrella. Pay equity has been part of an issue, although that's been relatively reasonably solved in recent times with the increased funding that was received. But just the clinical safety and security that medical staff have, knowing that they've got the supervision, whether it's from Dunedin or Timaru, that they need to be able to safely practice medicine there. And for us, the issue of challenges around rosters and so on should be more easily solved when we've got Health New Zealand with a very much a vested interest in making sure the service continues to our community. So timing has brought us to this point. Circumstances have got us here, and I think we've got as good a solution as we could hope for. We are putting a lot of onus on what the future integration of health looks like for our community, and that's something that we very much are looking forward to seeing how that rolls out and in what way our community can have more say in the provision of health around the Waitaki district. So with that, I will. I guess we'll do this. Yeah.
So is it possible just to scroll down so that people can see recommendations 1 and the start of 2? Thank you.
So how do you do this?
So I'm just going to ask if councillors, are people happy that I put them as the complete lot? Okay, nodding. Okay, thank you. So I will put 1 through 7 with the amended number 5. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much for that. Just to add some spice, I've got a number 8, which I want to move, and that is that council provides our community with information which fully sets out the process and reasons that lead council to make this decision. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Holding, thank you. I just want to, this is something we want to do, and we need to do in the absence of consultation, which we would prefer to do. So we will just get the secretary.
Oh, could you send it to me, please?
So, sorry, Councillor Hopkins. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask, not very well.
Sorry, I endorse the sentiment of this. I'm just wondering what additional information do we imagine providing other than the comprehensive range of material that's been made available on the public record today? I'm trying to think. I'm not being flippant here. I'm trying to think what additional information can we provide beyond what's in the material that's in this agenda today.
So, as I stated at the beginning, we were prepared to consult. We have a whole range of information that was prepared for that consultation, which we can release, which explains the context to the decision and the options facing the council. I think that would be the starting point. There are other things council could choose to do as well to supplement that if they wish to.
Yeah, it's the ability to actually summarise it into more easily read document would be one aspect of it. The other is the potential to have a webinar with Q&A type webinar that we've had for other issues. So people get a chance to, if they do have questions and so on, to ask them, but have a public answer. Okay, I'll put that. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Certainly a bittersweet moment for all of us as we all everyone around this table, while we've been on council, has had a hospital activity linked to it, and that will be coming to an end. I will be issuing an invitation to Minister Reti to come down and basically have the meeting that he wasn't able to have with us a few weeks ago. It'd be good to do that as perhaps an official handover, and also in recognition of the agreement around the integration of health into our community and how Health New Zealand will work with us into the future. Right. Now move on to item 5.1. Which is the Chief Executive's report. It's the next agenda item that doesn't involve people coming in. So, sorry, Alex, go to you.
Given the other things on the agenda today and the weight of the agenda, I was going to say take it as read and open up to any questions if there are any.
Just getting to that. So on page 11, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you for the report, Mr. Palmley, and belatedly also for all the work you've done on the previous agenda item. Can you just give us a bit more information? On page 13 of your report, you talk about a pop-up festival that's due to launch in June. This is, I think this is part of the Better Off funding, Revitalise Our Places Oamaru. And on the next page, paragraph 3, the latest quarterly economic monitor from Infometrics shows tourism spend down 0.6% over the year to less than 180 million from 181 the year prior. This compares with an increase 9.2% in New Zealand and 7.7% in the Otago region. And yet guest nights were up. But can you just explain that? Have we done any work on, or has anyone given us any guidance as to why the tourism spend here might be down when it's up nationally and also in Otago more generally? I have one other question about the ORC, but I'll just stick to those two at the moment.
So the latter one there, in terms of the data around spend, is from December 2023, and I would point out that we've had some further information through since then, and since this report was produced, which will go into the council update report that comes from economic development, and so we're still trying to understand the picture, because that, the latest reports show a better picture for tourism spend within the district, which was reported recently by Tourism Waitaki on that data. So what I would suggest this is showing is that the period up to December was slightly flatter, but it picked up again after December, and those figures look a lot better for Waitaki, where we seem to outperform the rest of the region and the country. So it's difficult to get our heads around as to why that pattern is happening. I think it needed a lot more analysis. In terms of the event, the pop-up event you refer to, I haven't got any more information on that at this stage, but we can get some more information after the meeting on what's involved in that.
My third question then, very quickly, on page 15 of our agenda, you talk about additionally in Otago, this is to do with I think the rabbit management. Additionally, an Otago Regional Council biosecurity officer has made contact seeking support for a landowner-led rabbit control project at Kaikatu, which is likely to go ahead using existing funding. Is ORC dodging their statutory responsibilities in this matter? I'm under the impression, and I would be interested in hearing from the elected member for Waihimo, I'm under the impression that they are obliged to actually do this. And this idea that landowners are supposed to fund it themselves seems to me to be teetering on the cusp of ORC not doing the job it's actually statutorily required to do. Can somebody just give me a bit more information about this, please?
It sounds like a question for ORC rather than me.
Councillor Thompson's really keen to answer it.
For my colleague, the law changed, and regional councils do not undertake pest control work. They have a monitoring and controlling function only. So they will happily come to my farm and count the rabbits and then tell me what I need to do about it. But they do not have that function anymore.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Palmley? No. I think we're letting you off with that one. So, no. In recognition of all the other distractions you've had, I think it's fair enough that we leave it at that. Someone like to move, we receive the report. Councillor Cowles, seconder, Councillor Thompson. Those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Just looking at what report we can do next, because I think we've got. Okay. So what's that one? Is it ratification of?
Yeah.
Submissions? Okay. Right, so we're going to go to 7.5. Page 176. We've got four things we've been made submissions on. This is ratifying those submissions because they had deadlines which fell before this meeting. So ratification of council submission on the fast track approvals bill. Submission on the Otago South and Regional Land Transport Plan 2021 to 31, the midterm review, ratification of the submission to ORC's draft long-term plan and to ECAN's draft long-term plan. So Victoria van der Speck, I think, wrote those submissions, and we gave whatever feedback we wanted to into them. I'll hand over to you, Victoria.
Good morning. So this is really a suite of 4 submissions that we're bringing to council today. Retrospective ratification, given the very constrained timeframes from both central and regional government in these areas. So the most substantive is the submission on the fast tracks approvals bill. This is a significant piece of legislation, which is part of a suite of changes to the Resource Management Act under the new government. So essentially this is a streamlined approvals process for the delivery of infrastructure and development projects that have significant regional and national benefits. So a key implication for through council submission was to ensure that we've taken the opportunity to positively influence this new piece of legislation. I probably won't go into any more details on this particular submission. We're happy to take more questions. I've got Mr. Campbell here as well from planning, if we want to discuss that first before we move on to the other submissions.
Okay, we'll take them one by one, and we'll move through them as quickly as we need to, given that they have already been sent. Do we have any questions or comments on the fast track approvals bill submission? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking at the page 183 for my colleagues, the limited democratic process. I think that whilst we all at times have been frustrated by the planning processes, it is counter to what we've been arguing for localism with government to have some control and input over what happens on our patch, to now have central government imposing a process where it can be all over and done, and we have absolutely minimal input.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that particular observation from my learned colleague. My question is procedural. I did note that in this instance, we have asked to be heard. And I'm just wondering if that has happened yet, and if it has, what's the response from the select committee been to our submission?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Hopkins. Yes, we did indicate we wanted to be heard, and many people did across the country. There's a load of submissions that came through. Unfortunately, due to the significance of the volume of submissions and the constrained time frames that the select committee have, only certain people have been invited to present their submissions on this occasion. So as yet, we've not been invited to do so, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Okay, nothing else? Does someone like to move, we ratify the submission? Councillor Ryan, thank you. Councillor Linwood, thank you very much. I'll put it, those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, it's carried. Moving on to 7.6, the Target South and Regional Land Transport Plan midterm reviews submission.
So this submission is the relation to the Regional Land Transport Plan for Otago and Southland. Waitaki is part of that. So that this plan sets out the strategic direction for land transport and particularly around the key investment priorities. So I guess a key point we've made through this submission is there's been changes in categorisation between the previous government and the current government in relation to the Kapinui Bridge. So we've highlighted that. We'd like to note that in our submission that we'd like it to be included as an improvement project within that plan. That's probably the key. I'm happy to take any other questions in relation to the specific submission points.
Sure, thank you. Councillor Holding.
Sorry, Victoria, could you just explain a little bit further what that means? The Kapinui Bridge.
So sure. So under the previous government's transport national transport plan, there was a categorisation of the Kapinui Bridge that is different to what the current government is categorising it. So essentially, it was identified as an improvement project as opposed to a replacement project. So we've clarified that we want to make sure that this is still part of the agenda in the new plan.
So in saying that, are you saying it might attract a different kind of funding, but not a 10% model?
Councillor Percival.
A few years ago, we managed to get on the lower priority list the Alma rail overbridge. For some reason, that's dropped off the radar. Were you aware that that was one of our, or a few years ago, was one of our priorities to get that work done there?
Answer that question, no, I wasn't aware of that. We were just focusing on the current, I guess, the plans for the next 3 years.
Yesterday, Mr. Palmley and I and Councillor Thompson had a Zoom meeting with James Cagle from NZTA, and that particular issue on the state highway was raised, the overbridge there, because if there was a bad crash there, it would cause quite a disruption and possibly to both rail and road. Councillor Thompson, I'm not sure if you've got anything to add on that particular one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know it's listed as one of the potential of 20 potential choke points in the South Island by NZTA. Going back to the bridge, what Mr. Cagle intimated yesterday is that the new minister and the new government has changed the focus on funding, and we believe that we still have a good case to justify Kakanui, because the government is now talking about replacing structures that are at end of life. And we believe that the past flooding experiences and that at Kakanui still put it in that category.
Councillor Hopkins.
I'm starting a sense of panic is suddenly coming upon me. Are you politely telling us that by changing the word replacement to improvement, that it is possible that we're going to get less in the way of joint funding assistance than had previously been the case? I mean, are you preparing us for another cost shock?
I think the discussion yesterday was the realisation or the statement basically that there are a lot of bridges coming to the end of their life or the end of their scheduled life. So that is particularly across Otago and Southland. There are a lot of bridges that are going to need to be renewed unless some more life can be eked out of them in some way or some form or other. I think, we know that Kakanui Bridge project may not happen, and we've got to make sure that we make the case for it as much as possible. It's only been signed off by NZTA up to the planning stage. We're into this next stage of detailed planning. But there's no assurance, no guarantee yet that we will get the funding for the new bridge. So we have to keep making the case for it. And as these other mini bridges come on up to their time for renewal, the pressure is going to get on, be greater and greater. It's the reality of the situation. So yeah, it's a bit like Ashburton calling out for their second bridge that they've been making that call for the last decade, and it's only going to get louder and louder. We have to make sure that our voice is very loud there too. Okay, anything else on that submission? Okay, someone like to move that we ratify that. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Second, someone, Councillor Blackler. Those in favour say aye. Aye. And against, that is carried. Right, moving on to the submission to ORC's draft long-term plan. Any comments, Victoria?
I'll just take this as read if there's any specific questions that councillors may have. Thanks.
Okay. Any comments?
Yeah.
Councillor Hopkins.
I did have a question. I'm sorry. I'm just. Yes. Can you just give us a little bit more information under investing in our environment? We say that we support ORC's commitment, but then we say we'd like to note. I think we should just note, but we would like to note that in the Waitaki district, there's little difference in ratepayer cost for option 3, a regional wide rate versus ORC's preferred option 1. Can you just explain a little bit more about that, please?
So this just relates to, I guess, the difference between regional wide and targeted district funding. Waitaki district has got a very small population, so across the whole Otago region, we're a small percentage of the population that would link through to that regional wide allocation in the preferred option. And actually, we wanted to note that in our case, our ratepayer contribution would have been much different, but we're actually going to get significantly less benefit under the proposed new model.
That's it.
That's difference here.
We've asked them to go for option 3 rather than option 1.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. Just a question regarding the wilding pine control rate and the proposal to discontinue that and bring it into the biodiversity budget. Was there a reduction in funding proposed as well overall across the two? I just hadn't picked up on that, and given the important aspect of that right across the district at the moment, I was just interested to get a feel on your understanding of the possible implications of that.
I don't think it necessarily was a reduction in funding. It was more about actually being specific that a particular amount is actually going to Warning Pines. Whereas under the general biodiversity rate, it covers a much broader spectrum of things that can be included in that. And not just relating to trees, but other pressure control, so.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Councillor Holding.
Just in the comments around supporting that on-demand service and public transport, is that at a cost to ORC or is there a significant cost to WDC?
It's in response to public transport. The details are not, there's not a lot of detail there at the moment, but we are kind of assuming that there will be some user pays element to that at place.
Okay, anything else? Councillor Thompson? Okay. Would you like to move that we ratify that submission? Councillor Blackler seconded that. Those in favour say aye. And against, that is carried. And now moving on to the submission to ECAN's draft long-term plan. Questions on that? Comments? Okay, someone like to move? We ratify that one? Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Linwood. Those in favour say aye. And against, that is carried. Right, we're going to move back to, we're actually going to have the 7.3, which is the full report on the endorsement of the Canterbury Climate Change Partnership, and also 6.1, which is the community board recommendation. Essentially, if we do 7.3, we will be doing 6.1, but we'll have a discussion overall. We'll be in addressing 7.3, and people can comment on our Hariri Community Board recommendation if they wish to, if they feel it's not being covered in what we discuss. So hand over, we've got Chelsea Clyde, our climate change advisor, and we've got David Campbell, planning manager, with us. So allow you to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kitcher. This has been a sort of quite a long process, and Chelsea will sort of outline the background and also where we're heading to in future. But essentially, it's affecting the Ahuriri ward of the district, being the Canterbury Climate Change Partnership Plan. And it's been worked through over quite a number of months with both all the councils in Canterbury, the reference group, as well as with the community. So there was a session held in Otamatata last year, which we attended as well. And this is sort of getting to the stage where it's refining the actions going forward, and going around all of the councils in Canterbury to kind of socialise these, make sure they're fit for purpose. And that's the reason why we took it to Ahuriri, is they're the main ward affected, and they received it positively. Councillor Cowles was at that meeting as well, so you can comment on that if necessary. And I'll just basically hand over to Chelsea now to run through some of the background and what it's about.
That's all.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just start with some background context. So the purpose of this briefing is to update you on the development of the Canterbury Climate Partnership Plan and to seek support on the 10 draft actions to recommend that Council endorses these draft actions, which are contained in Table 1 of the agenda report. So the Canterbury Climate Change Risk Assessment was completed in 2021, and there was strong consensus amongst the Mayoral Forum and the Working Group to progress regional climate action. A partnership approach to climate action planning was agreed by the Canterbury Mayoral Forum in November 2022, including an agreement that funding for implementation of climate actions would be provided for in Council's individual 2024 to 34 long-term plans. There are 11 councils in Canterbury that are working to develop this plan of how we intend to work together and with others to support our transition to a thriving, climate resilient, low emissions region. The plan is being developed under the Canterbury Mayoral Forum structure with the Climate Change Working Group as a staff level group with representatives from Canterbury councils. This is the group that I am a participant in. The Climate Action Planning Reference Group is made up of elected members from each council who are overseeing the development of the plan. This group is also chaired by Mayor Dan Gordon from Waitaki District Council. All Canterbury councils are at different stages in the strategy development and action planning space and have different levels of individual resource and availability to implement action. Climate change is one of the Mayoral Forum's top 3 priorities. The recently updated plan for Canterbury again emphasises their climate change focus and includes reducing their carbon footprint, working together on climate action planning, building community resilience, and making our infrastructure as strong as it can be. Every council in Canterbury is already involved with climate action within their city, district, or region, and the partnership plan does not detract from this work. Instead, this plan joins the dots, enabling us to align our work programs, create efficiencies, and provide regional solutions to shared problems. The actions are intended to complement, not duplicate, climate efforts of individual councils and allows councils to advance their own climate change knowledge, understanding, and gain momentum in local action. The funding for this initial set of actions is being delivered through this round of LTPs. Councils have asked for placeholder bids, and we are awaiting the results of LTP deliberations at all councils before we can confirm the amount and funding that we have. So the project milestones to date is that we have achieved some significant milestones over the last year. In June 2023, we agreed on a strategic framework, inviting councils to provide feedback and endorse our vision, principles, strategic outcomes, and objectives. The partnership plan strategic framework was brought to the ACB meeting and subsequently endorsed by council in September 2023, as shown in figure 1 of your agenda. In November 2023, we engaged with stakeholders and communities on climate action through engagement summits in each district held during the What's Our Future Canterbury and Let's Pick a Path campaigns. In November 2023, the Chief Executive Forum and Canterbury Mayoral Forum, endorsed in principle that the recommended total investment of 1.47 million for collaborative climate actions. This is still subject to confirmation through LTP deliberations though. In February 2024, the Climate Change Working Group refined and agreed on a list of 10 actions and sub-actions, which I'll be discussing with you today. How do we want to do this? Do we want me to go into each individual action or?
I think councillors can raise those as they go, as we go through if they wish to. So Councillor Holding.
Thanks, Chelsea. You just mentioned about waiting on the long-term plan deliberations. I was away last week, but what, if any, deliberations did WDC have in regard to this, or was it just an endorsement?
Yes, just in terms of funding, that's proportional across Canterbury and actually is quite minimal as a result of, population, that type of thing. So I think the figures may have changed, but the annual plan budget for next year was only around 7,500 contribution. Then it ramped up the following year, subject to obviously the next LTP to just under 30,000 and then just under 22,000 the following year. So it's a limited 3-year program with basically just under 70,000 all up from us spread over 3 years, but a small amount in the first year, subject to the LTP obviously for years 2 and 3.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for this report. Although I do have concerns, when I read reports like this, I think they're actually contributing to global warming rather than help fix them, because the amount of hot air that is coming out of this is when I read nature-based solutions to climate, are we therefore going to in Ahuriri watch the bridge disappear because the river has by nature wanting to change course and live its life the way it merrily wants to.
That was a rhetorical question, I guess. Okay, any non-rhetorical questions or comments? Councillor Hopkins.
Just one procedural, very, very minor procedural question, really. I'm just wondering, in the light of the fact that we see on page 157 of our agenda under nature-based solutions, which sounds slightly Johnny Weissmuller-ish or Tarzan-esque, but I noticed that 4.2A was removed and replaced, and it was removed after the agenda for the Ahuriri Community Board meeting, but before the meeting was held. So the board actually did vote on and incorporate in its recommendation the words in bold highlighted red, maximise opportunities to collaborate, et cetera, with key stakeholders. But given that, I do just wonder if the recommendation shouldn't actually say acknowledges receipt of the Ahuriri Community Board's support for the amended Canterbury Climate Change Partnership, et cetera, because it has been changed slightly from what it originally was.
Chelsea, do you comment on that?
Okay. This is something I originally raised at the ACB. So when I sent this out, I didn't amend the change that happened during my last group meeting. So there was discussions with the working group, and I believe this was taken to a biodiversity forum and also a reference group meeting, and there was a lot of negative feedback towards this particular action. And there was a strong kind of consensus amongst a few members to have it more broad and high level, considering this is just a research proposal. So I did raise this at the ACB, but this change was made prior to that.
Oh, I'm not challenging the change, and I was present at the meeting along with yourself when the matter was discussed. What I'm saying really is we have a recommendation in front of us on page 154, and I just think, look, I'm actually happy to move it, but I will move it as I have just suggested it should be moved. That Council acknowledges receipt of the Ahuriri Community Board support for the amended Canterbury Climate Change Partnership, et cetera, and two, endorses the Canterbury Climate Change Partnership Plan draft actions. I'll move those. I will move those two recommendations as I just have.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ryan. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it?
No.
Any other speakers? I will. My concern is that this is an issue which is possibly we have allowed it, but it's one that's dividing the district in two, because we're going to have to duplicate all of this work with Otago. So my proposal, once we put this, the motion in front of us, is to move a further motion, which is that requesting the CE to bring a report which considers the opportunity for expanding this plan into the whole of the Waitaki district. I think it's just dumb to have say you've got these rules for this half of the district and these rules for the other half, and you know I'll take that on my head because you know it is the Mayoral Forum that's leading this. It is a subgroup of that, but it's something that we should really put our foot down earlier. But anyway, we'll see what the opportunity is when we get to that. So on the actual motion in front of us, I'm in support of it. It puts a line in the sand and helps us get moving on at least some action in the district. Councillor Cowles.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to talk to it quickly. I did attend the session in Otamatata. there was a wide range of stakeholders there, and it was a fairly positive sort of environment for getting the feedback on it. Taking note, Councillor Thompson, perhaps number 5, climate change education advocacy. We could perhaps pop you into that box one along as well. But no, but overall, I think it is something that I would support the fact that I don't think we need dual documents throughout the region for this, and it is one of the challenges that we have within our region. You know, we obviously have to deal with our 2 regional councils, but it does create an awful lot of bureaucracy, I suppose.
Okay, so we've got amended number 1 and number 2. I'm also ask mover and seconder. Item 6.1 is sort of back to front on these things. So, but it's acknowledging what Hariri Community Board recommendation was. We just need that as part of a resolution as well. If you're happy to add that in, you're moving all of those.
Sorry, doesn't number 1 deal with that? I mean,
It does, but procedurally, I've been told we need to have a resolution. So I'm just asking if you're happy to put your names against that one as well.
more than happy.
I think it's part of our system which needs to be streamlined. We'll talk about that in the governance operations interface transformation group. So moving both those reports in with the wording as has been said. So I'm going to put all of that. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. So the further recommendation, going back to the right page, would add a number 3 to 7.3. So requests the CE brings a report to council that considers the opportunity of expanding the Canterbury climate plan to the whole Waitaki district rather than having 2 plans for Waitaki. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Cowles. Councillor Hopkins.
I'll ask a question. I was under the impression that we had some discussions with ORC and asked them if they would be willing to essentially adopt or accept the Canterbury Climate Partnership Plan strategic framework as a template for, at least for Waitaki. Am I correct in assuming that they actually said no, they wouldn't, and they were determined to do their own thing at their own?
I'm not sure, but Mr. Campbell and Ms. Clyde are both happy to answer.
So I've been in discussions with both Otago and Canterbury since the beginning of the process and raised these concerns that I had. And they did take on board a lot of the work that has been done in Canterbury, but their ultimate decision was to do a plan for Otago. So it's actually just going to be guiding their regional work processes. It's not actually going to be a partnership like the Canterbury one is. So it'll essentially only be projects that Otago plans to do. They're quite different strategies in that case.
So the ORC is essentially saying to all the TLAs, not interested in your opinions, we're not interested in working with you. We are the regional council and we're going to impose something on everyone else, whether you like it or not, in essence.
I'm not sure we can take that from that, Councillor Hopkins. I think that's extrapolating things a bit far, but I think, yeah, if we were to consider ourselves in a similar position and someone was approaching us saying, we don't want you to do a plan for the whole of the area you cover, can you have a plan from, is from a neighbouring district? How happy we would be with that. So the Otago Regional Council is developing a plan for the Otago Regional Council on what it's going to focus on within its region in terms of climate change. I think to read anything further into it than that would be taking things a bit far.
Yeah, no, so I think essentially it's fine. It's as far as what we have for our district, we can do what we like with what ORC wants to do in our as part of their area, their region, which happens to be part of our district. Then they can do what they want and they can choose how they engage or not in that. So it's looking at making sure that we're not buying into 2 different situations that we have to have some responsibility for if ORC are solely looking at their responsibilities. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some sympathy with your position in terms of logistics, but I'd point out that my ward is classified as East Otago, and most people in this district choose to talk about being North Otago, not south of South Canterbury. And I would be voting against this on that principle of I'm going to stick with my tribe down south.
Well, essentially what it would be a Waitaki plan, fundamentally, because Canterbury aren't going to take, it's not about Canterbury's plan, it's about what's Waitaki's plan and having some responsibility for ourselves. Any other comments? I'll put it, those in favour say aye. And against?
Aye. No.
Member for Waihemo is slightly confused, but we'll declare that carried. Thank you. Right, where to from here? So I think we'll go to the next item 7.4 because we've got Mr. Barnsley here. So the receipt of the 2022-23 Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority report, right up there with the annual dog report. But more fun. Okay, so welcome, Mr. Bardsley. Do you want to introduce the report?
Thank you, and good morning, councillors and ELT members. As per the report, we have an obligation under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act to report to ALA each year on our activity. They're required to report to a Minister of Justice. So in order for them to fulfil their obligation, we provide their data for our district. The second part of that is we're also required, the report's a public record and we're required to have that made available to the public on our website, and it would be presumptuous of us to publish that report without first having it to council so that they can actually read it. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, councillors. Well, perhaps we might actually go to Councillor Hopkins first, not because he's put his hand up, because he hasn't this time, but as the chair of the District Licensing Committee, Councillor Hopkins, have you got anything you'd like to add in that role?
No, I don't think so. You'll notice all the information. You'll notice that there was one on license that was declined and one off license refused, or one on and off license both refused. You'll also, that was sort of hearing, you'll also notice my comments on the questions that Arla had asked, 5, 6, 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, I think. I would just make one point for those of you who are astute and studious. You may have noticed on page 170, names, addresses and types of licensed premises, and you may have noticed that the second from the top is the Waitaki District Council Social Club. Just for the record, we're very scrupulous about avoiding conflicts of interest. So Barry McGregor does those ones because he's not an elected member and not a councillor. And so, and there have been other instances where there have been potential conflicts, which have seen me step aside and Barry, as a commissioner, make the decisions on the papers to ensure that there is no actual or perceived conflict of interest.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Holding.
Is there any sort of trends in this report that would stand out, or was it just pretty consistent with the other year on year?
No, nothing for this for the year included in the report. The chair of the District Licensing Committee, Councillor Hopkins, noted a little bit of a move away from your traditional pubs and more in terms of the rural areas of gastro pubs, and the effect that the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act actually has on your rural communities and their normal, want of a better word, watering holes like hotels. It's very difficult for them now in terms of drink driving and things like that. So a little bit more people socialising at home or at clubs rather than actually at the pubs.
Yeah. Just slightly adding on from that, one of the things that I think is a nationwide issue, and I did comment on it, I think the increasing regulation and management of licensed premises and the costs, and I did say that and there is evidence, and we've had it from our own licensing inspector about this. There is evidence that the unintended consequence of that, as I say, in answer to question 8, is there's more unsupervised drinking, i.e. preloading, before patrons, notably but not exclusively young people, visit venues to socialise. And arguably that's actually perversely increasing the risk of alcohol harm caused by the excessive and inappropriate consumption of alcohol. But it's not just a local issue, it's a national one that I think Parliament's going to have to wrestle with at some point.
Okay, Mr. Cook, did you want to add?
Thank you, Matt Kircher. Just as Secretary of the DLC, I think it would be appropriate to acknowledge the work of the District Licensing Committee and the amount of time they put into it, and particularly the Chair, Councillor Hopkins, who dedicates a number of hours per week to this function, often behind the scenes, to keep the smooth running of the licensing structure for the council. So thank you.
Thank you for that. It's good to know someone's keeping them busy. No, we do appreciate the effort that goes into that. And there's always a certain amount of reading that sits behind the hours of being in the office. Right, any other comments? Okay, Councillor Holding, you move the report, receive report. Secondly, Councillor Linwood, thank you. No further comments. I'll put it, those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. We're just a few minutes away from morning tea, so actually break now. It's not worth getting into the next topic. So when we come back, we're going to be going to the irrigation. That's right, yeah, irrigation update. So that's going to be first up, and then move to the event centre item straight after that. So with that, thanks very much. We'll adjourn for 18 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're going straight to item 8.1 now, irrigation update. That's on page 228. Just welcome to the chamber, three irrigation representatives, Matt Ross, chair of NOIC, North Otago Irrigation Company, Rhys Hamilton, chair of Lower Waitaki Irrigation Company, and Andrew Rodwell, CE of North Otago Irrigation Company. So welcome, gentlemen. We'll get an update from you very shortly. We'll just hand first of all those to Paul and Hope to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Yes, so NOIC, we have a relationship with both irrigation companies, but well, generally more than one relationship. North Otago Irrigation Company with the loan has some accountability requirements where it is required to come and address council when requested. And when I started discussing this with Andrew and Matt, a couple of the key developments actually relate to Lower Waitaki as well. So it was thought more appropriate to have a joint update over the season that's just passed, where the companies are at the moment, and probably more importantly, sort of the future plans, which I think the companies are quite excited about. So with that pretty brief introduction, I'd like to hand over to the three of them to share what's been going on with their companies. Thank you.
Okay, we'll hand over to you, and just when you're ready, just press the silver button on the right-hand side, and away you go.
Thanks, Mayor, councillors. Appreciate the opportunity to present state of affairs for our company and what we're doing in general. We're just going to break this up into three bits. I'll talk briefly about the season that's been for both companies, and Rhys will be speaking about some a major project that Lower Waitaki's got before it, and Matt will announce the news about a new company that we've formed to manage the businesses of both irrigation schemes. So just as a brief intro, NOIC has been managing Lower Waitaki, Kura-Duntroon and Maraphanua schemes, the four schemes on the south side of the river, for 2 or 3 years now. And that relationship continues to go well. For the 23-24 season, it was reasonably wet until Christmas, but there has been no significant rain since Boxing Day. And so for NOIC anyhow, that represents record volumes of 70 million cubic metres. I know that probably a bit meaningless unless you sort of got some relativity, but that's 28,000 Olympic swimming pools. So without that water, the irrigated farming community across all of those schemes would have been in dire straits this year. Charges for the year continue to be stable. In NOIC's case, it was about $738 a share. In stark contrast, Lower Waitaki's charges are very low at $100 a share. That just recognises the completely different natures of the irrigation delivery infrastructure or characteristics of that infrastructure. But by contrast, Kura-Duntroon's rates are circa $1,100. So there's quite a spread, and NOIC sits more or less in the middle of all of that. From a regulatory point of view, you'll appreciate that we spend a lot of time looking at environmental performance and monitoring environmental performance. And what I can tell you is that this year has been another very good year in terms of the audited farm environment plans. So on-farm pass rate has been 100% across all four schemes, with a very high percentage, sort of mid-70% of those being A-grade passes. There has been some uncertainty with respect to freshwater farm plans. And there was a risk of a long gap emerging between ceasing using farm environment plans and the first required date for using freshwater farm plans, which was a bit of a result of the government and the regional councils struggling to get these programs up and running. So the companies, our respective companies, decided that we would press on with farm environment plans. We were not prepared to risk that gap emerging and a lack of sight on farm performance emerging. So, and they will continue in the near future. There has been some clarification on the freshwater farm plan program. It will come into being, but until we're certain that it will, we will continue to require our shareholders to operate with farm environment plans and to have those farm environment plans audited. We've had no major glitches on the financial side. We had one, NOIC had one very late paying organisation that is a corporate farming operation that you're probably all aware of, that's gone into receivership. It's public knowledge, Waitaki. We had a very short conversation with the receiver and payment was effected immediately after that. So we've got no outstanding arrangements at NOIC and nor has Lower Waitaki. There have been no major mechanical breakdowns and no environmental issues. And as I noted before, irrigation delivered to farm was delivered with high level of reliability and was a true godsend. One significant bit of information, which I'll close with, is that we've now sold all but 140 of the 20,000 shares that we have available for the community. That was a very significant result over the last 8 months, where a little over 2,000 shares were sold. That leaves us with just 141 shares outstanding, but we have formal expressions of interest for 400 shares. So those 141 will disappear. Any equity, net equity that's raised from those, of course, is distributed to our primary lender, the ASB Bank and the Waitaki District Council. Importantly, in there, 910 of those shares will result in the substitution of water from the Kakanui. So, which is effectively about 360 litres a second will remain in the Kakanui River as opposed to having been drawn out. So that will now be supplied via NOIC. So that should have quite a significant environmental benefit for the Kakanui estuary. So it's a bit of a roundup of the year to date, reasonably brief. Have to take any questions now or at the end, perhaps.
We'll just see if there are any questions at the moment. Councillor Holding.
Just an observation, like normally you'd have a hard copy presentation. Did I have that available this time?
No. Well, normally these updates are, we have had PowerPoint presentations in the past. If those are of value to councillors, we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, we'll give you some feedback on that later. If that's all right. Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. Just interested in your last comment about the Kakanui River. Could you just, is that people that are currently extracting from the river who will now own NOIC shares?
Correct.
So, and you'll augment the flow of the river?
No. So this is, it won't be augmentation. It will be, so a number of farms in the Kakanui area have permits to take water from the Kakanui. And I guess they've recognised that that's probably not an option for them. Under Plan Change 7, most of them have resecured those permits for a further 6 years, but they know that at the end of that time, at the very least, if not before, those permits might be rescinded. And so to secure their farming businesses, they've opted to purchase shares and receive NOIC water. So what it effectively means is the water they would otherwise have taken out of the Kakanui will remain in the Kakanui, and the effective flows in that river will be better, will be higher as a result.
Thank you. And of the 2,000 shares that have been sold to complete the finality of the share sale process, what do you have an indication of where those, or a rough split of where that's gone? Like, has it gone to existing businesses wanting to continue? Like this last example of the Kakanui is one part of that. What about the other kind of intended uses?
The bulk of the shares have been issued to existing shareholders. There were roughly 41 applicants for shares, of which 2 were new shareholders. So in terms of the farming profile for the 39 existing shareholders, I'm guessing, to be fair, that they would fit the typical profile of an NOIC shareholder, and that's effectively 68 to 70% dairy support. So there'll be a number of those shares will have gone into small top-up situations for dairy farmers. So no widespread conversions. These are just undershared farms that have now topped up and got their balance a bit better.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Andrew? Okay. Reece.
Cool. So I'm going to give a bit of an update on Lower Waitaki, and obviously, as Paul alluded to, the key relationship between Lower Waitaki and the council was that it supplied the water to the boundary of town from the Waitaki River for the last 50 years. So there's a key relationship there from a shareholder point of view. Andrew mentioned before about the differences in rates, and all of this stuff comes in waves, and there's periods of time where things are better for farmers and periods of time where things are worse for farmers. And Lower Waitaki's story to date has been one of having a scheme that was built by the government back in the late 70s and 80s, and a 35-year water consent that we've had since 1995. So there's a few key drivers for change in the company that we're working through at the moment, with the key one of those being water consent lapses in 2030. So we've got 6 years to come up with a plan with that. Obviously, the regulatory environment between 1995 and 2030, you can all appreciate there's some significant changes there. So there's some issues to work through, none of which are insurmountable, but we need to have a plan and start working through it. So from that comes 3 major work streams that we're going through at the moment at Lower Waitaki. One is a change in how we've done general business in the past. So it's traditionally had what we'd call an operating structure that directly reports to the board, just with some race managers managing water flow to farm boundaries into town without too much of thinking big picture of terms of where we're heading. So we need to change the structure there, and Matt's going to talk to what we're looking at doing in collaboration with NOIC. So that's 1. 2 is we need to identify where the company's at the moment from an asset point of view. So there's 2 sub streams of work from that. One is identifying where we're losing water, because one of the big criteria is coming into reconsenting in 2030 is going to be every cubic of water that gets taken from the river needs to have a use, needs to be shown where it's getting used. So flow gauging on the races, understanding where we're losing this water is key. And second to that, the work's being completed at the moment is for the first time in the last numerous amount of years, we've shut the main race down and are pumping out the siphons that deliver water to get a good picture of where we're at, essentially making a full asset management schedule so we can start planning for changes on that. And then once that work's been done, we can start coming up with a plan of, well, what do we need to change in our current infrastructure to meet the consenting requirement come 2030? So as I said, none of that's insurmountable. There's going to need to be some changes. We need to go with the times, and some of it you could make an argument we've delayed it to a certain point, but I think now's the time to start making some changes. And yes, there's plenty of time to get done what needs to get done.
Reece, any questions or comments? Silence. It's all good. Matt, and to you.
Firstly, thank you, Mayor Kircher, councillors and everyone from the council management team for having us. It's always good to come back and see you, keep you up to date with what we're up to. We're obviously a provincial town, highly reliant on our local rural community to keep that ticking. And in this part of the world, as Andrew alluded to at the start, irrigation is an essential part to the reliability of the outcome. Some pretty tough circumstances on other places on the east coast of the South Island just now, because it's been a particularly dry year. Reece touched on obviously the specifics of Lower Waitaki. The operating environment that the schemes are in now is seismically different from the one that we were in when we were, given permission to take water from the river. So when we were granted consent. At that point in time, there was a lot of focus largely on infrastructure. So in Noik's case, it was obviously building some new infrastructure and delivering water to new country and converting dry land to irrigated land. In Lower Waitaki's case, they've had existing infrastructure. It's delivered in a way that was fit for purpose for that time in the 70s. And if you compare that to late 90s, early 2000s, when the farmers of this area worked out how to pump water around, you've now got the Noik infrastructure. So what we've spent a lot of time doing in the last few years, obviously Andrew alluded to it, Noik has ended up transitioning across and helping some of the other schemes. Noik has been the only one with a management team. It started with approaches from others to help with their environmental programs, which we did. Environmental then morphed into a little bit of helping the boards, providing back office support, things like that. And so we've had Andrew talked about the 2 to 3 year journey, which has been working with not necessarily all of the schemes, but a staged process where we delivered environmental to KDIC and Maraphanua. That then morphed into some assistance with management. And in the last 12 months, we've had the programs for both Maraphanua, KDIC, and more recently Lower Waitaki. So as we've gone through that, you'll appreciate each of the farmer owned companies have got their own identity, they've got their own way of working, and they've had their own different operating structures. And farmers are quite a parochial bunch, as you'll know, and they like what they have had. And so change is something that is a process that takes time to get their head around, to adjust to. And so the last 2 or 3 years has been a transition where Noik has offered contract management services. It was never the intention that Noik would do this long term. So over the last 12 months, we've had committees from the different companies working towards, okay, what comes next? And as of last Friday, we had our first board meeting for a new entity, which we've called Aquis. And Aquis is going to be an irrigation management company. And so Noik will no longer have any operational function and no operational team. The intention is that all the irrigation schemes will exist in their current form because they still hold the consents. They obviously have their own respective debt structures and shareholding bases. But Aquis, which is the new entity, is owned by Lower Waitaki and Noik, and it will deliver contract management services to all the schemes. And what that will allow us to do, the main priority is to obviously capture and deliver the efficiencies which we think we've identified through this process, rather than doing it all 4 times in the local area. Importantly, we need consistency across some of our things that we do, our activities. So we need operational consistency first and foremost for the farmers, but we need environmental consistency. We obviously operate both in the ORC catchment and the Environment Canterbury catchment. We take our water from Environment Canterbury, then use it in other places. So we've got quite a complex environment that is a lot wider than just keeping our schemes running now. And so our view to the future is that our stakeholder relationships with everybody that has an interest in the Lower Waitaki catchment, and that's a big long list of people. Our work in that area from now until reconsenting is going to be really important, and that is best done together. All the people we need to meet with, to have relationships with, don't want to see 5 different entities asking the same 5 questions. And it's likely that the regulatory environment has got a few twists in the road that we haven't quite thought of yet, sometime between now and 2030. That for this area here and for the council's knowledge and thinking, that starts next year. So we're up for the 3rd review of the Waitaki allocation plan sometime during 2025, and Environment Canterbury will have that process underway. The whole hydro network is up for reconsenting from 2025 as well. So in the next 12 to 24 months, there's going to be another potentially complex consenting environment that those of us that have been around long enough will remember. It's a challenging process and it's quite complex. So the irrigation entities are of a view that we're far better working together on that and being resourced to do so. So hence the direction of travel. So that sort of summarises, I think, the things we're thinking about, how we've structured ourselves to operate in the world that's changing. And so you're happy to take any questions and obviously intend to keep the full council updated as we go through, because there's going to be a lot of things changing over the next wee while.
Thanks, Matt. Councillors, any questions? No, must have been very informative. Okay. All right, if there's nothing then, we'll go straight to the recommendation, which is basically receiving and noting that information. Someone like to move that? Councillor Holding. Thank you. Councillor Linwood, second that. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Well, thank you very much for coming in, gentlemen, and appreciate that update and just understanding where things are at. We definitely know that things are very tough out there, and yeah, it's just not easy at all for any type of farming, but some more than others. But anyway, keep up the good work of delivering water around the district. And yeah, we look forward to catching up with you again soon. Thank you. Right. Just find where I'm at on this. Right. So next, councillors, we've got the Network Waitaki Event Centre flooring report, and that is item 7.9. And we've got several representatives of the project board. I'll hand over to Paul. Yes.
You volunteered.
Yeah, Paul's volunteered. So, but just welcome to the chamber, dear Doug and Don. Yes, good to have you here.
Thank you, Mayor Kirch. Yes, Mr. Van Speck, a project manager, was supposed to be giving this introduction, but unfortunately he is unwell today, so I have some speaking points, which I may miss some things because although I am reasonably aware of all of the issues, certainly don't have the quite the in-depth knowledge that the project board has. So with so once I sort of oh well, hopefully not, but so yeah, so I'll get cracking. Right, so this is yeah, the objective of the board was always to have a facility that managed to meet the widest possible needs of the community. And that's why I initially thought that the mix of hard and sprung flooring would be appropriate. But really, as further information come to light, this has been sort of a topic of quite serious debate by the project board, and they've really come to a different position. And that position is now that their preference would be to have 6 timber sprung floors in the facility rather than a mix of 4 and 2. Really, the main reasons for that is that the board believes that this will actually meet a wider range of recreation users and have really sort of increased the effective capacity of the facility, both in terms of numbers and other sports, particularly emerging sports and sports for, so that's new emerging sports and people like with disabilities and other things that really do require timber floors. But unfortunately, no change can occur without sort of some negative consequence, and the primary negative consequence that has been identified is that would probably eliminate the venue as an effective place for tennis to be played. But overall, the view of the board, and I'll let them speak to it very soon, is that really the 6 sprung courts provides the best long-term future arrangement for the facility, and that that will meet the needs of both the greatest number of sports and the greatest number of participants. So if it's right, I'd probably hand over to the board just to make any additional comments on that or highlight anything that I underdid.
Thanks, Paul. Hand over to whoever wants to speak on this from the project board. Oh, you could just put the mic on, Doug, just the, yep, that's it.
We've given a pretty good overview, in my view, previously to you all, so I think it might be better if the questions were to come from the councillors.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess, this is a change of heart for some of the members around the table. Doug, if you were happy to sort of detail some of the thinking process around, moving from 4-2 type floors to 6 sprung floors. Or Dylan, are you?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Kirchen. Look, we've been informed really by the process we've been following as we've been going about making this decision. The letter from Sports Otago, as well as the Edgar Centre, supports the view that we should go for wooden sprung courts rather than the alternative. We appreciate the impact that this would have on alternative sport, but as Paul quite rightly summarised, this is for the greater good. We feel that it meets the best interests for this investment for our community. I'll pause there to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, I have a number. First question, I noticed this letter from Sport Otago is dated the 13th of May. That's very recent. Who solicited this letter, please? Was it the process board, or was it provided to the project board by another party or parties?
So that was after discussions with Sport Otago.
My question is very clear. Who had the discussion with Sport Otago? Was it the project board or was it other parties?
Adia was answering, she hadn't finished, so can you just let some people finish?
Yes, it was initiated by the project board and it was provided to the project board directly to Eric.
So this is very recent information in which essentially Sport Otago resiles from everything that it said originally about having the maximum number of codes and facilities available for the greatest number of sporting groups, as evidenced by its own survey in 2021 and also the business case. Did James Nation consult with the local representatives of Sport Otago before he wrote this letter? Do you know?
He consulted with Sport NZ. I'm not sure, but Sport Otago, Sport Waitaki, we're in sort of limbo. We just changed to a new representative. So I'm not sure whether he spoke with the new representative or not, who probably wouldn't have quite the experience of the region by that stage. They haven't gone against that. I think what we need to remember is that the business case and the feasibility study are quite some years old. And since that time, we have new sports, which we didn't even know would exist. Futsal, pickleball, etc., which are massive sports in other areas. And they're all indoor sports. And so the numbers of those are very, very big, and they are played by huge numbers. For example, 8,000 people play futsal indoors in Dunedin. It's the biggest growing sport there. So their recommendation was that on the basis of where sports are heading and on the numbers of participants that are taking part, that the best use for the best flooring for this particular centre and for Edgar Centre, etc., they've gone through the same thing at the Edgar Centre, is that they're changing over to wooden sprung floors. So they've already done 2. They've done another 2 recently, which is what Blair has alluded to in his letter to us and to the project board. So yeah, I think they're still very much of the greater good, and the greater good is that the numbers are significantly higher. Tens of thousands will play indoor sport on wooden floors.
Well, I have a supplementary question to that. How can Sport Otago be concerned for the greater good when it is quite happily at the 11th hour proposing the removal of courts that would actually provide access, according to the business plan, to more than 462 tennis players in a variety of groups, and that doesn't include the recently formed Tonga Tennis Club. So how on earth can that possibly be construed to be a sports organisation acting in the global interests of sports generally? Additionally, is it correct that the letter from the Edgar Centre does not necessarily advocate an absolute commitment to sprung floors, because the letter from the Edgar Centre, if I've read it correctly, indicates that half the courts remain artificial surface or turf, and only half are wooden.
Those aren't the numbers that we're aware of for the Edgar Centre. So, but at any rate, I think we have to look to the future. We can't hold to the past. And the future of sports is indoors on wooden floors. And that is the information we've had time and time again from all the centres we've been involved in up and down the country.
May I ask, okay, paragraph 2 of the Edgar Centre letter says the main sports hall has 18 courts. They were originally all artificial turf courts, which was seen as the best multi-sport surface at that time. I go on to say, since that time, we've added further courts in 2010 and the recent 2, which now gives us 9 wooden courts in total. In short, half of their courts remain artificial surface by their own correspondence.
I'm not sure that this is getting to the particular point, Councillor Hopkins. It's part of the reasoning for going to 6 is about some of the other events and so on that can be held as far as tournaments and things like that. So it's yeah, that is part of the information. So, you know, ignoring that part and just saying, well, they've got both. I mean, yeah, if we made it 8 courts, we could have 6 and 2, but we haven't got the budget to do that. So we just have to be a wee bit moderate around about the reasoning that's given there. So I've got Councillor Thompson next.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note in the officer's report that the committee have generously offered to support tennis in a fundraising effort to get a purpose-built facility. I'd just like to expand upon that. But my first concern that I'd like you to answer is that going to jeopardise your ability to deliver what you've already committed to deliver to the event centre? And then second to that is, over what sort of time frame would you anticipate that we can assist tennis in getting a hard surface or all-weather facility?
So I guess this one is a trust, charitable trust, the charitable trust itself question, because it's not the project board who has offered that, obviously. But we are absolutely behind having a purpose-built facility in whatever shape or form tennis would like, within a budget, obviously. We've looked at the Dunedin option where they've built on Otago Boys High School land. It's what they call a dome. It's a rubber dome. It has something like you see out of Pukuri with that new development there, and it's in rubber and it has the structure over top. Then we've also looked at other alternatives at Westlake Girls High School. They did something similar, but not an enclosed, totally enclosed dome, but it does have a roof and it does offer, it's play, and lots of sports use that, and the school uses it as well. So it's purpose-built for that. So, and there are others coming out as well. We're finding as well where there are other structures available. So it's I think when we weigh up the best of both worlds, I think this would give us the both worlds. I don't think it'll jeopardise our fundraising at all. I think what would jeopardise our fundraising is not having 6 wooden courts. for existing facility. But then, if we have the two going, I think there will be a bit of delay because we need to get this event centre done and we need to get it done properly. But then our focus will absolutely turn to tennis and get them to where they need to be or where they want to be.
Councillor Howling.
Just supplementary to Jim's question, it's, have you had a conversation with tennis and what would be suited to their requirements?
Yes, we had a meeting with them. I just explained what was there and the cost of that dome, etc. We have had that meeting with tennis, yes, about 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins again.
Yes, I have some questions for the project board. Question one, has the project, we're told on page 208 of our agenda that you have received further information. I would have argued, having sat in on one of your meetings at least, that all you received was further argument and very little of it substantially evidence-based. Can the board tell us today, in making this recommendation, what the cost of a all-weather surface area for tennis elsewhere would be? Has the board investigated through the business plan the predicted opportunity cost of lost revenue to the sports and event centre from the loss of activity from 500 tennis players who would obviously be contributing through the hire and the use of the facility? So where are the figures that will enable us to make an informed financial decision about what the alternative cost of relocating tennis would be and meeting the tennis community's requirements, which would have been met within the existing framework of the Sports and Events Centre and the existing budget, had this change not been made? And what can the board tell us about the projected lost revenue from this change in use and this departure from the business case? I have one other supplementary question, but if I can get an answer to that, I'd be very grateful.
Yes, I have crunched some numbers based on our meeting from tennis 6 weeks ago. We were informed that it would only be used for those who it is their main sport. So that was one of the things. Also, we were told it wouldn't be used in summer because they used Chalmers Street unless it was raining. And also they had 32 players in an advanced squad and they had 12 who do cardio tennis at nights, 3 hours on a Thursday. So our numbers, when we cranked out the numbers of total users over the period, unfortunately tennis only came in at 1% of the total users for the whole period. So it's really tricky. And none of us like having to have this conversation with you, but we have to be practical about the number of people who would use the facility and in comparison to the larger sports, which are massively tens of thousands of people over a period of a year.
I think we've got to be realistic about this, Jim. There's we're arguing over or debating over two possible indoor tennis courts, when in reality there are between 25 and 30 tennis courts within the borough town boundary. The reality of every tennis player playing on these two courts is well, you do your own maths. Tennis is extremely well catered for court-wise throughout North Otago. We're only really talking about on bad weather days. That's how I see it.
Well, clearly the project board has been given different information than we have been given, because we have been told that there is a large cohort of junior tennis players who would benefit considerably from access to these indoor courts for training and sport development purposes. Putting that aside for the moment, I still haven't had a figure for the actual cost of relocating or providing the facilities for tennis at a venue other than the Sports and Events Centre. And I still haven't had a figure from the project board, who've received further information apparently, as to the prospective opportunity cost of not having up to 462 or 500 people using the facility. The other question I have is we were told at a workshop, and this, I'm surprised the information is not in this report. We were told at a workshop that it would be possible to install underneath the synthetic surfaces of the two courts that won't be sprung floor. It would be possible to install the infrastructure needed to convert them to a sprung floor subsequently, should demand justify that change. We were also told that a private contributor or private individual was willing to pay up to $300,000 to actually convert the synthetic surfaces, to convert sprung floor courts to synthetic surfaces in 2 or 3 years' time, should the demand justify that. Now, if the project board is willing to have one individual commit to up to $300,000, and if the project board is willing apparently to commit to having the fundraising trust fundraise an undisclosed sum of money for an alternative location for tennis, is the project board willing to commit to fundraising or advocating for the trust to fundraise $177,000, which was the cost we were given to install the undersurface infrastructure that would enable conversion of the artificial surface to sprung floor in a couple of years' time, should usage data justify that change?
I'll have a crack at some of those. So firstly, yeah, given the financial the financial envelope that council set that the facility needed to be delivered under, it was determined by the project board that spending the money on having the facility to potentially convert them later on was essentially a poor use of funds. So that's why it wasn't pursued any further. It was investigated because that was suggested as an option, but it's quite, it's been determined that that's not a practical and cost-effective option. In terms of you raised the issue of additional information. As was included in the answer, the business case was developed some time ago. So that was primarily an update on the potential users of the various sports, both existing sports and emerging sports, since the business case was developed. It is important to recognise, yes, there are a significant number of people that play tennis, but the actual practical number that can utilise the facility at any time will always be smaller for tennis than team sports that can occupy and use the same sized court. And that makes it, so effectively, the income is actually, it's more positive. There's more positive inflows by having a greater number of people basically using a court at the same time compared to a limited number of users. So really, and in terms of fundraising and other commitments, I mean, I think that's very difficult to answer at the moment, particularly, it's if the cost of a facility is talked about at the moment with very limited research, then suddenly that's the magic number that is used forever going forward. And I think it's premature to try and estimate the cost of a facility that would actually need to be developed to meet specific needs.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Deputy Mayor Haley.
Thank you through the chair. I think it's a challenge that we do have to make a decision today in terms of the floor surface, and I do understand the situation that the project board, they've come back to us, and then also acknowledging, this paper that is ahead of us. I'm just in support of actually what Mr. Hope has said in terms of the new emerging sports that we have, and I do have to be mindful of taking the emotion out of what our decision making should be. So we do have a significant growth in terms of some emerging sports. I'm interested in the higher percentage of volleyball, as well with our high school students and things. And those are some of the new trends that I think we do need to actually consider when we are making this well-rounded decision. And some of those other sports groups, like you've got sports like futsal, pickleball and floorball. So I do think even though, I think originally when this came back to the project board, that it was presented by by the Netball Association, they actually also spoke for these other emerging sports that we do actually just should also consider objectively. So those are just some of the points that I just wanted to make. I am considering future sustainability as well, and then also maximizing and leveraging the amount of usage too. So it is I just want to acknowledge that it's a challenging situation, but we do need to look at this objectively and not be too emotional about the decision. It's about the future use, like of this event centre, but not only just sports, it's other events as well. And if the flooring situation can be mitigated to allow for other events to be happening, then we should be open-minded and take all things on board. So I guess those are just my points. I'm acknowledging the project board members that are here, and also the offer from one of a member of our community as well to try and help mitigate and support what the change or the potential change to including it as a sixth floor. So those are just some of my points that I just wanted to quickly add in.
If I can just add a little bit to Hannah. I've played tennis for over 40 years, including representative tennis. So one would think I have a bias in that way, and I do. And I did at the start of this whole project. But once all the facts and figures came out, the reality is with two synthetic courts, a maximum of 8 people can play tennis. God knows where the other 480 are going to play at any one time. So the reality is the greatest majority of tennis players are still going to be playing outside. So all that has just gone to, compared with, we'll say futsal or whatever, we're talking, I don't know how many people it is, but it's probably well in advance of 20 playing on those two courts. From an income perspective, from a council point of view, tennis, unfortunately, just doesn't stack up as a financial investment in this project as well.
Thank you, Doug. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I'm prepared to test the feelings of the meeting.
I'd like an opportunity to ask Mr. Hope at least one more question.
Okay, I'll take your comment as notice of motion. We'll go to Councillor Hopkins for one more question.
Right. Am I correct in saying that the council, financially straightened as it is, with a 13% rate increase on the table, with a significant body of people concerned about the cost of this event centre anyway, am I correct in saying that we are being asked to vote today by officers of the council on a change, the cost of which, in terms of providing a purpose-built tennis facility, has not been provided? The opportunity cost of the lost revenue of the Sports and Event Centre has not been provided, and we have not been asked to consider the $177,000 we were told it would be needed to extend the number of sprung floor courts from 4 to 6. Now, if we're not going to do it in 2 years' time, but we are going to vote today to actually go from 4 to 6, that $177,000 is added to the cost of the Sports and Event Centre today. Am I correct? And why aren't these figures in front of us? So we can make an informed, intelligent, rational decision.
And just before, as you answer that, Mr. Hove, I thought the change from 4 to 6 sprung floors was more around 50,000, not 177.
Yeah, that's correct. So
thank you. I'll let Mr. Hope answer the rest of the question there.
yeah, so, and that is in the report. It's on page 207. If this change is made at this stage, when the designs are being finalised, the change in cost is $50,000. 170 was to put in the infrastructure underneath the synthetic courts to allow a later conversion to timber courts. Why it is not included in here is because, as I said, essentially the project board determined that that was a poor use of funds given the other demand on funds for this facility. The reason there is not a number showing the loss of revenue is because, as you said, it's expected that by having the wooden courts, the effective revenue that can be raised through the centre will increase rather than decrease, because the courts can be, as you said, utilised by a far greater number of people. It also increases the likelihood that tournaments, particularly South Island wide tournaments, will be able to be hosted in Oamaru. And sorry, there was a third question here that really related to why that 170 option. Well, I think that's already been answered. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, well, personally, I feel that the arguments now are circular. So I'm prepared to test the meeting and move option 1, that council revokes its early decision and approves having 6 timber sprung courts. And I do that very, very much with the statement that the project board and the fundraising trust have offered to help secure funding for a purpose-built tennis facility in Malta.
Thank you. I'll have to second that. Do you wish to speak more on it? No. In seconding it, it is also reluctantly. I don't like scope creep, and this is certainly a variety of scope creep, but equally, I think I am convinced by the people who have spoken to us today and previously about the reasoning, particularly you, Doug, as a tennis player, having the particular view you do, but also obviously someone who's got a lot of skin in the game with this particular project. I am also very pleased to read the comments in there that the project board and the fundraising trust are willing to help fundraise, because I know that previously tennis has been trying to fundraise to get some of the grass courts made into asphalt courts or whatever it is, whatever surface it is, and that's been very difficult trying to prove multiple use, but I think there's possibly more opportunity for that. So I've got a third motion that I'll make after if these two get passed, just around that. So anyway, any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. I declared a conflict of interest in this item because of my current role as president of North Otago Tennis and any perceptions around that. But I think I can probably add some value to the conversation because of my involvement in the wider sporting community in Waitaki. Yes, I'm passionate about the growth of tennis in the Waitaki district, but I'm also a player and assistant coach in North Otago Netball's Premier Grade. I'm involved in the Waitaki Community Recreation Centre's Summer Mixed Basketball League every year, and I'm really excited about the opportunities that this facility can offer other existing sports to grow and new codes to establish. And whatever decision is made today, I'll continue to support the event centre because of the incredible opportunities it offers for this district. A couple of things that I just wanted to address. So the letter from the Eager Centre references tennis numbers being static to declining in Otago. And while there are very different reasons for that in Otago, tennis is a growing sport in Waitaki, especially over the past 3 years. And so going back to the discussions around the around the business case and feasibility studies and things that have changed since then, so too has the growth of tennis. We've had there's been an increase of 500% in numbers in the district. So just to clarify the current numbers for tennis, there are currently close to 250 paid junior members across the district, majority of which are in Oamaru, but with programs also in Kurau, Omarama, Twizel and Waimiri, including senior numbers to that, they're close to 300, and that doesn't include social players, members of the newly established Oamaru Tongan Tennis Club, which we're in the process of affiliating with, all Masters players who aren't part of the senior competition. There's not much point in rehashing. Councillors heard last year from representatives of North Otago Tennis. They presented an argument. There's no point in rehashing that now. I just, I guess just wanted to add that existing detail there. Also appreciate the offer to fundraise from the project board and the trust. However, if the recommendation is supported today, tennis with its growth needs to look to future proof now. And with the project board still being 4 million short of the current target, I think tennis as an organisation would have to get going sooner than they would be able to, waiting for the project board and the fundraising trust to meet the target of the event centre. So that's, but just to emphasise, I'm a very passionate supporter of the event centre in whatever form it takes. But I just thought I'd add those current details from a tennis perspective.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ryan. That's very helpful. Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah. I think it's fairly clear from my questioning, and the sense of frustration I feel and have expressed clearly, that I'm not going to support this. And it's quite clear to me from what Rebecca has said, that tennis remains a sporting code that would like to be part of this and does not want to be locked out. I think it's fair to infer from what our colleague has told us that being part of the Sports and Events Centre would be their preferred option. My concern about this, I'm angry about the way this has been done. The council voted unanimously in December to actually go for 4 and 2. And all we have had subsequently has been a persistent small lobby group that has chosen to actually work behind the scenes. In my view, I question the project board even hearing from netball on the occasion that I sat in and replaced Rebecca, who felt at that stage that she'd been placed under undue pressure in terms of this matter. And I bitterly regret that having happened. My view is that we must speak today, not just for 2 codes or 1 code and a small faction of lobbyists. We need to speak as well for the 23% of people who, the only time we've surveyed the whole community, said they didn't even want the Sports and Events Centre, and the 36% who didn't want us to spend more than 10 million on it. So between the 2 of them, that's nearly 60% of our community have signalled that they're not entirely happy with us spending 14 or 15 million, let alone a cent more. And today we are being asked to actually scrap an idea that has been costed and funded and agreed. And there are 3 at least costs that we do not know and cannot substantiate. And how irresponsible is that at a time when we're looking at socking people with 13% rate increases? We don't know the cost of this alternative all-purpose facility for tennis. We don't know the cost of not having tennis as part of the event centre in terms of the number of people who may use it in off peaks and in between and enhanced court use when team codes aren't involved. And we do know that there's at least another $50,000 that to actually equip the 2 courts that are currently identified as artificial surface, but may become sprung. Now, so that's 50,000 plus an unknown cost, plus a potentially contentious and problematic funding scenario for the whole event centre anyway. The trust has not delivered the money that it said it would, and the sort of the vague assertion that the project board and the fundraising trust have offered to help secure funding, but they can't even tell us how much they actually would be seeking to secure. I believe we should stick with our decision made unanimously in December, in the absence of clear, coherent, logical, rational, and soundly financially based advice, none of which we have received from the project board. And for those reasons, I would go back to the business case.
Time's up. Councillor Hopkins.
I would just remind people that the business case included netball, basketball, tennis, futsal, other sporting codes, and also to sustain and grow participation in core and potential codes and to enhance health, well-being and resilience for all members of the Waitaki community. And this decision will not achieve those objectives.
Sorry, councillor Thompson, then, sorry, no, you moved. So you get right reply, Deputy Mayor Halalele.
Thank you. Very quickly, I do acknowledge councillor Hopkins' comments just around the process of how some of the things that have been happening. But I'm also considerate of those, I'm not supporting lobbyists, I'm supporting those parents of children that are having to travel all the way to Dunedin, travelling to Christchurch and travelling to Timaru to take their children to play those sports that we are listing here as emerging sports. When they do go to Edgar Stadium, they actually go to the other park with the timber floor. And that's where I can see all of our Waitaki students that are travelling here on the weekends to attend tournaments, they're actually playing there. So it would be a great opportunity just to kind of be a wee bit future focused, like this is an awesome kind of opportunity for us to encourage participation, but also, looking at supporting these other new sports for the whole community. So I'm supportive, and I'm also acknowledging that I'm actually open-minded to consider other options. It was me that actually moved the 4-2 back in the last year, but on consideration and deliberating all of the perspectives, that I am open-minded to kind of reconsidering my position. So I'm fully supportive of supporting the 6, the change mainly because I can see the pipeline of these emerging sports that are happening here for the community, but also leveraging on the usage, maximizing the usage for them. A lot of our the inter-schools that are played here, they have limited access, and a lot of the students are having to play late at night as well, when we could actually make things a wee bit easier and different for them as well. So that's where I'm standing. I'm supportive of the recommendations as they stand. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Blackler.
Oh, thank you. I'd just like to speak against the recommendation for many of the reasons councillor Hopkins has just given, and also the fact that there's too much information that hasn't been put forward in the report here, or questions that have been raised historically, and no kind of none of that feeding into this report to allow us to make an informed decision. So certainly open to the suggestion of incorporating, future proofing of the ability to pivot to that flooring if it's informed by evidence going forward. But based on the information that I have in front of me, I'll be voting against.
Thank you. Any other speakers before we take the right of reply? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would point out to councillor Hopkins, the vote in December was not unanimous because I intentionally abstained from voting. That's all. That's only a minor correction. Look, I share the concerns of the process we've been through, but we can't let the process we've been through allow us to shift our eye off the prize at the end. So I remain committed to support the 6 courts as I've moved.
Okay, I'm going to put that. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against?
No. No.
That's carried.
Show of hands, please. Call show of hands, Mayor Kircher.
There were multiple voices for and 2 voices against.
I'm abstaining.
And 1 abstention.
Okay.
Okay, well, we will take the extra time to have a show of hands. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? That is still carried.
Could I have my vote against recorded, please?
Okay, I would move motion number 3 acknowledges the offer by the project board and the fundraising trust to raise additional funds to provide improvements for tennis facilities separate from the event centre. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Cowles, thank you. It's a very simple one. It's just putting on the record that the offer has been made. We're acknowledging that and certainly implying acceptance of that. I think it's important that we do provide great facilities for all our sports as much as we can, and tennis was in the fold until this decision, and we want to make sure that they still get some of the services that they or improved in facilities that they are looking for.
Can you read the recommendation out again, please?
3, the council acknowledges the offer by the project board and the fundraising trust to raise additional funds to provide improvements for tennis facilities separate from the events centre. Okay, I'm going.
What, may I speak to it, please?
Yeah, yes, certainly.
I will vote for this. I don't think it's anywhere near emphatic enough. Personally, I would actually ask the board and the fundraising trust to identify the total cost of the alternative location for the all-weather centre for tennis, and to commit to raising that sum in total. And in my view, nothing less than that will satisfy the concerned members of the community who are already worried about the cost of this. This is a timid step in the right direction. But the people who've engineered this, in my view, unfortunate change, need now to step up to the plate and say how much it's going to cost to get what they want, and also agree to fund it in full.
I certainly wouldn't advocate for this taking as long as the event centre has, but the things that you're asking for took many years to clarify for the event centre. Hopefully the discussions can get underway as soon as possible, but that's really going to be between those different parties, and recognising that not all the project board is here either at the moment. Sorry, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is turning into the battle of the two Jims, but I think to actually publicly state that we want to flagellate the people who have engineered this process. I personally find engineering the process a little bit offensive. It has been a process, and we've been asked to.
A dubious process.
Councillor Hopkins.
Well, again, Councillor, I think we need to be focusing on trying to move things forward in a positive manner, not trying to apportion blame if there is any to apportion.
Councillor Cowles.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to speak to this as well. For all the reasons that I voted for the previous motion, I agree we need to move this forward. But it is important also that we do signal that we acknowledge that tennis needs some input. I think we've all sort of had a bit of a discussion, and you guys have recognised some of the solutions and possible solutions that could be out there. And so that's why I've seconded this motion is to ensure that we don't lose sight of that. And the only thing I'd encourage is that we do try, as we've heard, that we need to probably get on with it as soon as we possibly can as well. So that would be my only input, but thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to put that. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Right. Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you, Dylan, Doug and Adia for coming in and speaking to that. Weathering the storm, some might say.
See you all being cut the ribbon.
Thank you very much. I think the demolition of the grandstand's the first bit. I think Councillor Hopkins on the wrecking ball would be a good sight. Okay, councillors, we're on to 7.1. So that's the approval of the Waitaki District Council Waste Minimisation and Management Plan. We have Mr. Cook here. I'm not sure if we've got Lucy-Ann White and Steve Clark joining us online. So I hand over to you, Roger.
Thank you, Mayor Kutcher. Yes, we do have of Mrs. White and Mr. Clark online. They're actually at the Waste Minimisation National Conference, so very appropriate. They've stepped out of that to join us and ask any questions. So the 7.1 is the approval of the Waitaki District Council Waste Minimisation and Management Plan 24 to 2030. I think everybody in the room has been involved in the development of this, right from the review of the 2018 to 24 report, the briefing around the construction of the new one, the public consultation work, the hearings, the deliberations. And so we've now reached the final stage, which is the adoption of the new report. I do want to remind councillors that it is not a must-do list, it is a can-do list. And it's very important that we have as many options within the can-do list, because that allows us to spend the waste levy funds which come from central government. And if they're not in the waste minimisation plan, we cannot spend that waste levy money on the items.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us, Lucy Ann and Steve. I've been to one or two rubbish conferences in the past, but you literally are at one. But anyway, thanks for joining us. Thanks for putting up with bad puns. Do you have anything you want to add to introduce the report?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Kircher. We're just really excited to bring you the recommendation to adopt the Waste Minimisation and Management Plan 2024 to 2030. We're really aware, and it's being highlighted to us, the content that we're involved in over the next few days, that waste will be one of the greatest challenges of our future. And as Roger stated, this WMMP gives us options for being able to rise to that challenge, and a bit of a roadmap to become or to transition to a circular economy and become a waste-free Waitaki.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I suppose it's a question and or a comment. I notice on page 21, there's a reference to the very start of this, where option 1 is preferred, with a new waste strategy for New Zealand, Te Rautaki Para, released in 2023, which gave a new national strategic direction for waste. The old WMMP no longer aligns. My problem with this, and as the chief executive's introduction also references this, and there are various other reports throughout the WMMP that we're proposing to adopt today. Chief executive, for instance, talks about the government releasing a new waste strategy, Te Rautaki Para, in 2023. And this means that waste will be one of our big issues and greatest challenges. There's a reference later on, I think, on page, I won't go looking for it, but there's a reference to us giving effect to, or having regard to, Te Rautaki Para. Now, my view is this is clearly a document that has not found favour with the new government. It hasn't been ratified. There was one piece of that Te Rautaki Para proposal that went through the parliamentary legal process or legislative process. The rest has sat in abeyance ever since. It's in limbo. And there's no evidence that the new government, the coalition government, is.
So have you got a question in there?
Sorry,
So,
yes.
yeah, it's taking 5 minutes to get to the question.
I'm sorry, Gary, you're quite right. I apologise. My question really is, why are we placing such a reliance on a document that hasn't been legislated and hasn't been implemented and doesn't appear to have found absolute favour with the new government? It seems to me we are unduly reliant on it, and I want to know why we have chosen to be so.
Who wants to address that one? Mr. Cook?
I'll start with that one, and Lucy Ann and Steve may have information hot off the press from the conference, but I don't think they've had the minister's speech yet. Recently, Mayor Kircher and I joined in a teleconference with the Ministry for the Environment and the Minister Simmons, regarding the situation in terms of the items that they had not yet legislated. There were, from memory, 5 items that they'd not yet legislated, 2 of which have an implication for us. One, primarily the paper that we'll talk to later around curbside collections. There was no clear indication in that teleconference as to whether they were going to mandate the remaining item or not. And I'd prefer to discuss that when we discuss the next paper around curbside options. The policy that the previous government put out around waste, much of that doesn't actually need to be legislated. Much of that is around how the country will meet its waste management issues, how it will deal with waste in the future, how it'll meet its national and international obligations with regards to waste. Waste is a significant problem. It's costing more and more to get rid of, whether you're curbside collections, whether you're private collections. Waste is an intergenerational problem which needs to be dealt with, and I think that what is contained in the national policy document is relevant whichever colour party is in government. Waste is a problem. Waste needs to be dealt with. This is the most current thinking on waste, and is what we as a district should be aligning our waste minimisation plan to.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, if I could, as well. And yeah, I didn't hear all of what you had to say, but you were drawing on my forward there, which is very deliberately focused on, whilst it references government policy, it's mostly focused on what do we need to do as a community in a district that's right for us. And I think, we know we're spending millions of dollars at the moment dealing with some very poor outcomes from previous generations' decisions around waste within this district. And do we, as this generation, want to hand on those sort of problems to the next generation, or do we want to take responsibility for our waste and what we do with it? So whilst the government policy landscape might change, what doesn't change is our ambitions, or your ambitions are set out in your strategic framework, and the need to do what's right by this district. And we can only go in terms of the government with what is the current policy framework, but recognising that governments will change and their policy frameworks will change. But our focus and our role is on what is the need of this district and our communities going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and I take your point, and I take Mr. Cook's point as well. I still, however, feel that I would probably moderate the references to Waitaki Para, and perhaps just indicate that we pay heed to it if and when mandated or something of that nature. The other thing, I'm not sure that I probably would want to ask you why you say that they were bad decisions in the past. I mean, you could argue the location of the Hamden landfill was maybe too close to the coast, but no one at that stage had appreciated how rapidly that coastline would erode. And the fly tipping on Beach Road, it wasn't a council tip, that was just irresponsible private individuals. So it's not as though, as entities, local authorities have made necessarily bad decisions. I mean, geography and coastal tides have stuffed us up with regard to some of the landfills, but the rest of it was irresponsible private behaviour, wasn't it?
So, yeah, I said we're paying the price for previous decisions, and it wasn't just about authorities. But I recognise hindsight is always a good thing. What we're asking to do here through this strategy is have foresight and think about future generations and how we might impact on them. And there were bad decisions by various people that mean that this generation is paying for the waste that the previous generation put in those places.
Steve or Lucianne?
Yeah, thank you. Just to address Waitaki Para, so that has been adopted by the government, and it forms part of a wider waste reduction work program. And I think the important point is that Waitaki Para gives us a new direction where we all step up and address, the way that we have behaved, whether it's been as community members or council around waste in the past, and say, look, we need to do better. There are some nuts and bolts aspects of that to how we get to that new sort of direction and aspiration of the vision of Te Rautaki Pāra, which is to be a low waste, low emissions society by 2050 based on a circular economy. So there are some pieces of legislation under that strategy to get to where we need to go that have not yet been passed into law and are under review, but we're not aware of any discussion at the MFE level about reviewing Te Rautaki Pāra itself.
And I'd just like to add to, particularly around Councillor Hopkins' comments around vulnerable landfills. For the first time yesterday in an MFE briefing to territorial authorities, vulnerable landfills now sit high on their priority list. They're not looking to apportion blame or anything like that. They are acknowledging that it is a risk to our environment. And as an aside, Project Reclaim is high on the radar of the ministry, and the feedback that we are getting is that they are applauding us for being proactive. So just want to make that point.
Thank you. All right. Anyone, Councillor Holding?
So just my question would be then if what we knew in 2023 and what we know now, would the 2018 to 24 waste management plan still be fit for purpose?
Mr. Cook.
No, the old plan is not fit for purpose. We've already have been through that discussion. The Otago Waste Survey, the Otago Waste Assessment, which was conducted by all councils within the Otago Regional Council area, considered that, and the decision of council was that it wasn't fit for purpose, which is why we embarked on writing the new one.
Oh, well, with that, if I can ask the chair, I'll be happy to move the recommendation.
Sorry, can you speak up, please?
Yes, yeah, I've got, I think Councillor Hopkins may have just one more question under his hat there. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. I appreciate your generosity in allowing me to do that, and I do apologise. It's just that these are issues that I'm engaged with and interested in, and I think the community is as well. Pages 63 and 64 of our agenda indicate what we're going to do in relation to the Otago study. And I think the Otago study at the bottom of page 63 identifies an option: council-controlled urban household curbside collection services introduced that meet mandated requirement. Now, our actions on that page and the next page, two actions on page 63, so 64, so 63, and then 3 on 64. We will consider implementing a council-controlled urban household curbside service for dry recycling. The others are all the same. Could I suggest that we should actually, given that the option specifically says that meet mandated requirement, can I suggest that we add those words, that meet mandated requirement, in each of those 5 instances? Or can I ask for comment as to whether that should be done?
I'm happy to talk to that.
Steve. Yep.
Yeah, I think what we need to understand is that our WMMP is a document that expresses what we may or may not do. It's not committing us to a specific action, and to have a more broader comment around the services that we might provide would appear to be a bit more appropriate. The relevance of this document is that if we get too specific, this document actually dictates what we can and cannot spend waste to levy on. If you had something as specific as that in there, and through the process, the services weren't mandated by central government, but council decided to introduce them anyway, we would not be able to spend a levy on it because we've been quite specific.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I was just going to clarify, and this is effectively giving you the option to consider it. So the first one is, obviously we'd have to, if it was mandated, deliver it. And then over the page on the agenda, page 64, it's about the option to consider going above and beyond what is mandated. It's not saying we're going to do that. It's saying that would be brought before you to consider. And then what that means is that you have the potential to spend waste levy on that because it's in the plan.
Councillor Holding.
No more questions. I'm happy to remove the report.
So you're moving. We have a seconder. Councillor Linwood. Okay, speakers to the motion. None. We'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Don't go away yet, Stephen, Lucianne. You've got your starring role next as well. 7.2, approval to progress curbside collections option scenarios to business case. And it would be good to have the introduction from Mr. Crock again.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. As I mentioned in the previous item, Mayor Kircher and I did join in a Zoom call with MFE representatives and Minister Simons regarding the future mandating of curbside collections. Result of that conversation is it's still unclear whether she intends to progress that through Parliament. Possibly not, possibly yes. Possibly a larger population base that's over and above the current 1,000 that it's written for. So it still remains unclear. So you're probably asking yourselves, why do officers keep bringing this back to the council chamber for approval? The reason why we bring it back today is that we can't rule it out being mandated at some point, or even to the original timeframe, in which case it would increase significant amount of pressure on officers to get this information if we don't proceed. There's also an opportunity existing currently where it is 50% funded by the ministry and 50% funded by the waste levy. So this allows officers to go and get the information for you to make a realistic and informed decision. After all, that future decision around whether we go for curbside collections might be what's best for the district rather than what's best for a political decision out of central government. So we seek your approval to progress to the business case stage of this. As I reiterate, this is not seeking a decision around the future of curbside collections. This is seeking a decision to go and collect the information so you can make a more detailed and informed decision in the future.
Just to add to that, as part of that conversation, I was pleased to see that we weren't going to be experiencing a hard policy shift from one extreme to another. From what the minister said, she actually did ask, well, what do you want? And that was almost took me by surprise, to be fair. But it was a good opportunity to discuss things quite openly. There definitely was an indication that they were looking at larger population sizes, at least for the start. And for us, it would only probably apply to Ongaroo and Western as the first and second largest towns in the district. And but having said that, the economics may be that you know, to get the mass, it could be the maybe a coastal run or whatever service that's provided, but only this business case would actually help us understand what the economics of that look like and what types of services might there be. Certainly not saying it's going to be a 3-bin, 4-bin system. It's looking at what are the options, what's cost effective, what actually is good for the environment, and you know, what's good for the pockets of our community, whatever part of the district they live in. So anyway, that's wee bit of feedback on that from me. Councillor Blackler.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Thanks team for putting this together. I just had a couple of questions. Just wanted to understand that the Ministry for Environment co-funding that's referenced throughout this document, that's still available and that there's no possible changes to the setup in that space, i.e. is it secure? And around the private contribution to waste, on page 86, there's a graph there that kind of maps out under the various scenarios, low CE through high CE, what the private contribution to waste is. I just wanted to understand, or if you guys could just take us through verbally the assumptions built in and around this. Obviously that's just a snapshot of your average household, say, or so if we follow through the graph and take it through to the point where high CE is the cheaper outcome and the better outcome for the environment, is it because people have been forced into a waste reduction outcome which eliminates the most costly part of the waste disposal? Is that why it kind of lands where it lands? But yeah, that third question kind of links to the second one, but Mr. Cobb.
I'll go for the easy bit first. In terms of funding, we have a signed deed of funding from MFE. It is 2 stages. We've completed the first stage, which was the modelling report, and we are now seeking approval to go to the second stage, which is the business case. There is a possibility that if we don't proceed with the business case stage, we may be in breach of that deed and they want the funding back for refunded for the first stage, but that is unclear. We haven't explored that yet, but because we hope that you'll approve the second stage. As for the detail of the graph on page 86, I'll ask Steve and Lucianne to speak to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. And yes, there are a number of assumptions that are made in coming to the figures that are presented there. And I just want to say from the get-go, we do not have access to the private operators' stats and collection tonnages and things like that. The future bylaw will fix that. And so a number of assumptions are made by Eunomia based on what they have done in the past with other councils and what they know happens. The low CE has a very high waste cost, and the reason or the assumption made there is that cost accounts for a 240-litre waste bin being emptied once a fortnight and a certain number of trips to the dump. So it's a full community cost. There might be assumptions might be further down in the report. I haven't been able to scroll down. Now that, of course, what that does, it is an assumption. What it doesn't address is that there are a number of folk in our community that are very good recyclers and only put their rubbish bin out once every month or 2 months or 3 months because they're very, very good at recycling. It would be very, very tricky to come up with a low CE option that has a look at that range of actually how good or bad people are. So the assumption is that, excuse me, that is the level of waste that is generated by on an average based on other districts, and then it steps down slowly in terms of as the diversion operations are introduced. The figures change based around collection frequencies and also more awareness, but also to mid CE. Both mid CEs include the coastal towns as well. It's only the high CE that includes up the valley. So you get some economy of scale, and certainly these are the idea of this report was to give us an indication of where these things will land. What the business case will do will allow us to drill down and get even more accurate in terms of what a true cost would be to the community. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Just supplementary. So it's fair to say that there may be a small cohort of the community that could be worse off financially, but if you look on page 88, point number 5, the diversion potential of undertaking the high CE scenario, there's a marked jump from, you know, around 37% diversion to 60%. So there's a huge jump in the diversion potential by going down such a path. So there could be some people that are worse off, but huge gains for the diversion outcome.
Yes, that's a very good point, and one that we do acknowledge. But this is not out of the ordinary in terms of council services. There will always be winners and losers, and when a new service is introduced, whether it's true user pays or whether it is an apportioned service like this, there will always be winners and losers. Another example of that is a targeted water rate. You've got Nana that uses, a single elderly person that uses 500 litres of water a day compared to a family that might use 3,000, but they pay the same rate. There's always going to be winners and losers, unfortunately. The focus for us in this is exactly what she touched on, and that is the diversion rate. One of the proposed mandated changes from central government is councils will be required to meet minimum diversions, 30% by next year, 40% by 2028, and 50% by 2030. We currently sit at around 25%. The only way that we are going to meet those diversion figures is that if we introduce new diversion services, and that's evidenced by what was called a swap analysis, where we did an analysis of what was going through the transfer station up at Waste Management, and that's where we identified that just a little bit over 50% that was going into that transfer station, if there was infrastructure, if there were services available, would be diverted.
Thank you. You're really running out of time, but if
Sorry, just a real quick supplementary, just to confirm around that increased diversion, is that because of the service provisions proposed, or is it because of the outlying populations being brought in, like primarily driving that increase in percentage?
Yeah, it's the former. It's having that service provision being made available will allow for that increased diversion. In terms of the outlying areas, a business case again will look at in more detail, where the value add is in terms of that contribution. But that's what's going through the current waste management transfer station. How it gets there at the moment is through private contractors, and unfortunately we can't get information on where the waste is originating from.
Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins, one question, and straight to the question, please.
Oh, sorry. I do have more than one question. The first one is, how much is this business case going to cost? We're not told that. Second question, who do we anticipate might do the business case? And the third question, with regard to diversion, that has just been raised by Councillor Blackwell, my recollection with the current waste minimisation management plan, we did a survey, and that survey demonstrated that through WIRT, we are achieving more than 60% diversion now, based on the sample and feedback from members of the public who took part in a questionnaire. So am I correct in this, in that recollection?
I think that was stuff that went there, not the overall waste stream, because they don't see a lot of the waste stream. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. I feel that the cost of the piece of work with the particular contractor could be regarded as commercially sensitive, and therefore should not does not need to be discussed in this public meeting. The actual cost to council is the opportunity cost of the officers working on it. We get the grant money, which we already have the deed for, and we have the waste levy money, which we can spend because it's already in our WMMP. I think we are at danger of losing sight of what we're asking permission here. We're asking permission to go to the next stage where we get you reliable information, detailed information that will allow you to debate further whether you want to implement curbside collections and what level of diversions you want to try and achieve into the future. And I think to get this information is important. And I quote Councillor Hopkins from a previous item in the agenda, and that was to make informed, intelligent and rational decisions. And we would like to go away and get that information, and we'd like your permission to go away and get that information, and at no cost to the council apart from the opportunity cost of Lucianne and Steve working on it with our contractor.
He in fairness, he didn't mean it all the time. Does anyone wish to move the recommendation?
My other question, who is going to?
Oh, Councillor Hopkins, you've had plenty of time for questions. You've asked many questions. We need to keep moving on. So Councillor Ryan, you would like to move? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Linwood, seconding that. Right, speakers to the motion. Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped the gun here a little bit. No, it seems like the logical next step to do a business case and be able to make an informed decision based on the detail that we're going to achieve through doing the business case.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, I am happy. The reason I asked who might do the business case is because it is, in my view, the business case or the study we have received is enormously unreliable. I would invite members to look at pages 85 and 86. The numbers simply don't add up. The low cost of 900,000 doesn't include the private cost of rubbish disposal because that's excluded from that estimate. The next page, the numbers do not stack up. The explanation as to why things increase is problematic. There are no costings provided at the bottom of that page for green waste. If you go to page 111 of the agenda, you'll see references to the amount of emissions that would be avoided from recycling, and they cite that as minus 716 and minus 949, and avoided emissions from landfill. That doesn't take into account what is being diverted or recycled now. There's no figures in here as to what might be earned. We're not told if the various green waste costings for IVC between 3.3 and 5.3 million, vermicomposting 1.3 to 1.4, covered windrow 2.2 to 2.47. The difficulty with the document in front of us on which we are basing some of these assessments is, in my view, the numbers are flawed and unreliable. And I would beg the Chief Executive to read it critically and actually request officers to find a hard-nosed organisation that could do a tough-minded business case with reliable figures, because I don't believe these are.
I think you're making the argument for the business case. That's what the business case would do is, that's a high level study. The next step would be the business case, which would be about getting, firmer figures.
But it is important to know who it might be done by.
Councillor Holding.
Probably going to prolong this a bit further, but to symbolise Councillor Hopkins' points, we are in the summary decision-making criteria, it is saying it's key significance and key financial criteria, but we don't know what the key financial criteria is.
I'll look to whoever wrote or signed off the report as to what the response to that is.
Is it possible to repeat the question, please? I didn't catch it.
Just in the significance box, it shows that the financial significance is high, I believe, and just the reasoning for that.
the reason why I would have recorded the significance box as high for financial is that when you come to make the final decision on this, it will be a significant financial decision. The matter before you is not considered financially significant.
Thank you. Okay. Speaking on it, I certainly, have my concerns, but I think good data is really critical to whatever decision we do end up making. And at the moment, we don't have good enough. I think the report sets out, it actually does state that there are shortcomings in some of the data that's there. The assumptions have to be made, but there's a bunch of information which we just don't know about. Philosophically against introducing a service later on that makes it more expensive for people who are doing the right thing and makes it cheaper for the people who aren't doing the right thing. But we need to get the information and look at what services, if any, and maybe none, that we decide to have curbside collection. But let's get the data sorted and get something that we can make a decision on and base it on all of those great qualities that Councillor Hopkins referred to earlier on that Mr. Cook repeated. Any other speakers? I should put it then. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? No. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucy and Steve. Back to your rubbish and recycling. All the best for the rest of the conference. Okay, councillors, we now, I'm just juggling all over the place again. We now need to go to 7.10, the Schedule 2 of the Waitaki District Council Delegations Register. And again, Mr. Cook, this is page 214. Mr. Cook.
Thank you very much. Yes, this has been quite a task, actually. The legal delegations, which cover all aspects of legislation, is, as you've seen in the report, sitting at around 570 pages. And the general delegations, another 30 on top of that. So I'd like to acknowledge the work that the governance advisor and the quality assurance officer have put into supporting this. And getting this to where we are today. It is important that it's maintained accurately, and as we enter into a period of transformation, we need to be able to update it and keep it as current as possible as roles change and responsibilities shift during that process. Hence, we have asked for the council to approve the amendment process for this as well, in order to just keep it as current as we possibly can during that time. We have Charlotte Whiston, Quality Assurance Advisor, here to help with any questions and explain the loco delegations, which is the new software that now house local delegations and local authorities. It's a new piece of software that we have access to through the local government network, and it has made the job somewhat easier than it was last time we did it back in 2020 through Anderson Lloyd.
Thank you and welcome, Charlotte. Anything you want to add to that before we get into questions?
No, I think Roger's covered the most of it. I'll just wait to see what questions people have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, just getting through to the. So we've got we've got the two parts of the delegation. So I think if we start with if there's any questions on any of them, it's look at the attachment 1 perhaps first. I mean, personally, might have made it simpler, but reading through it was definitely not simpler. And the apparent duplications and various things that were in there was made it even more so. But I do think, quite honestly, that a workshop or a briefing on this would have been helpful to understand it before we got to the agenda that with 570 pages in there. But anyway, we've got what we've got. But you want to respond to that, Mr. Cook? That's fine.
Hey, thank you, Mayor Coacher. The delegations register we had before and the delegations register we have now in local delegations, we've largely transferred the delegations across. It's required some updating in titles where roles have changed their title. We've been quite careful in where we've needed to separate out, for example, where we've got people maybe holding two roles or in an acting role and things like that. Local delegations allows us to do that a lot easier. It's a officer mechanical type thing, so it's easily searchable database. It allows us to link warrants to it. It gives ready access to the members of staff so they can see what their delegations are readily, easily, quickly. And it will be on the website, so public can have access to it as well. So it's really just a change in the mechanics rather than having a hard copy, say PDF version, into a more electronic register. So the actual details of the delegations has had minimal change, really.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins?
My question probably follows on from yours, Gary, or Mikacha. There is a reference in the report on page 216 that loco delegations being more user-friendly than the current Word version. I went and had a look at loco delegations, and it occurred to me that it was unfathomably lengthy, 500 plus pages, and a whole lot of activities and organisations other than ourselves. Is it possible to put us front and centre? Is it possible to edit the loco delegation so that the Waitaki District Council's delegations appear first before everything else, given that that's presumably what people are going to want to know about when they go to our website, rather than, one that deals with aviation or other agencies altogether?
Governance advisor wants to address that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the link that I put into the report takes you directly to the Waitaki District Council page on the LocoSoft website. So it is actually our register. So rather than going a long way or some other way, the link that is in there takes you directly to the Waitaki District Council delegations.
I don't mean to be bloody minded, but when I click on item 4, attachment 1, loco delegations, legal delegations, the first thing I get is administration and so on, Administration Act, and then there's various other references to airport authorities. That didn't seem to me to be us. Have I misread something?
On this page here, there's a link to.
If I may, all those acts are legislation under which council officers may need to work under. So all of that legislation is relevant to Waitaki District Council.
Okay.
Really hard to find my way through this, having made a number of annotations and things along the way. There was references to essentially Parliament and various things that were to MMP and so on. And I was just it made it quite confusing, to be quite honest, with some of the references in there to understand it. I guess I've got an overarching question, and is there anything in here that gives delegations to officers that isn't already in the delegations that we adopted in December?
If I may.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the delegations that you adopted in December were about council's delegations to its committees, subcommittees, community boards, and to the chief executive. This set of delegations is about the legislation delegations that come out of, so some parts of legislation say that some delegations cannot be done by anybody other than council. So that includes the setting of the rates and there's a couple of others listed in there. This one is about legislative delegation, so it's not related at all to what you did in part one. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just go through and try and find a bit. There's constant references to the executive management team. Is ELT going back to EMT, or I'll just get clarity on that one.
So there's situations where it's delegated. For example, there's items delegated to example me in my role as Heritage Environment Regulatory Group Manager, and there are situations where it's delegated to a member of the executive leadership team or the executive management team. So in the current format, we've taken the executive management team as any member that is a group manager or the chief executive. And in other situations where it says the ELT, that would be the executive leadership team, which would include potentially the operations managers.
Question. If I understand Roger and our governance advisor, or Mr. Cook and our governance advisor correctly, what we've been told today is that these local delegations relate only to the delegations provided in legislation to officers. They do not relate to the delegations we as a council elected to give officers. So these delegations are above and beyond our purview anyway, as I understand it. Am I correct in that assumption? And if I am, I will happily move both recommendations.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you are correct in that. Thank you.
Then with the permission of the chair, I will move both recommendations.
Okay, on the basis that there isn't any delegation to staff that's not already there, well, do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Haley. Well, I still have a question, and it's on God knows what page. Page 23 of 35 in the general delegations. There are, there may be other examples, I don't know, but it talks about basically being delegating the power to enter into lease agreements and so forth if the rental doesn't exceed $50,000. But it doesn't say whether that's per annum or per month or anything. So there's just some clarity around some of those aspects, which I think should be in there. It should be very clear what those levels are. I would assume so, but again, it doesn't, it's just making sure that the information is full. There wasn't, in that property area, I mean, there's delegations to the Harbour Area Committee around property, but there's not a reflection of that in some of the property delegations that are there. They seem to be worded more generally. So just raise that.
Well, if the second is happy, based on what you just said, and accepting that the changes you wanted to make were minor, I would be happy to amend my moving the recommendation so that it read with amendment rather than without.
Well, I think the second one allows staff to make those amendments or corrections, minor corrections, and if it's like it's intended as 50,000 per year is the limit, then they put that in. I think if it was it's 50,000 per month, then it probably becomes a bit more of a concern. So I think by moving 1 and 2, you probably got it all right.
If I may speak to that, I agree. I mean, that is something that Charlotte can look at as part of what is specifically in the Act. But I think that's just a minor issue. Thank you for raising it.
Okay. Any other comments, Councillor Holding?
Would someone be able to explain just the some Gresson's advice there a bit further? Page.
Sorry, is that in regards to the Reserves Act? Yep. So there's various thoughts on it. in our 2020 delegations, we had kept it out along with the Resource Management Act and the Local Government Rating Act as acts that couldn't be sub-delegated. But there's different schools of thought on it. And Simpson Grierson seem to be saying that under section, where am I? Sorry, I've just lost my page. There we go. Under clause 132, there is no limits on sub-delegations in instruments. I guess being careful, we would prefer to go down the line of bringing any changes to the Reserves Act back to council rather than allowing officers to change those with the agreement of executive leadership team.
Just one further question. On the waiver of fees and charges, it's allowing for fees or charges up to $5,000 to be waived, etc. Is there a policy on that to help guide staff? Is it?
I don't believe there's a formalised policy. It is quite a rare situation to waive any fees or charges. Typical situations would be where it's in dispute or there's particular financial hardship, things like that. And they're normally discussed at executive level or CE's opinion is sought. So it would be minimum number of occasions per year that would be needed.
I'd just suggest, from my perspective anyway, there's 20 or 30 people potentially that can make that decision, and you know, that a policy would be helpful to give it transparency and some guts to the what gets used and when. Just be a suggestion from me. Is there anything else, councillors? Otherwise, we will put it. Mr. Cook, you've got an objection.
I'd just like to reiterate that a majority of these delegations are just day in, day out work that officers need to be able to just conduct the business that they're employed to do. And there are a few delegations in there that are a little bit more consequential. But I'd ask the elected members to have confidence in officers undertaking those delegations. You've got portfolio holders, which will be involved in some of those more meaty things, perhaps. You've got Simpson Grierson, who are updating and reviewing this delegations list every quarter. And you've also got, I'd like to think that you respect the political savvy that the executive leadership team have. And we don't intentionally set out to bring you surprises. We like to have those conversations ahead of time, and we like to bring decisions to the table for you to make. So you're aware of them. So we certainly have no intention to run wild with these delegations.
I think it'd be very wrong if you thought we were implying any of that. We've got our role to do as well, and we hope that officers actually understand that we do need to give scrutiny. We do need to make sure there's some testing of some of the assumptions and so forth, and also that we do have an understanding of what policies are in place, what sits behind some of these delegations. So particularly where maybe 30 people have got the opportunity to make a decision, that there's consistency around that. It's not because, well, I like the cut of the jib of that person, I'm going to give them I'll apply the policy to them and not to someone else. So again, it's just having having that balance in there to make sure that we've got that. And we're very much in the process, I think, of affirming this. So I don't think there's any doubt around the intentions here. So any other comments? I'll put it then. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried unanimously. Mr. Cook, thank you. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for your work on it. I know it is quite arduous going through and trying to think of all the different scenarios and situations where these things need to be applied and so on. So thank you very much for the work that you've done in the background there. Okay, councillors, that's I think everything on the public part of the agenda.
May I move that we go into public excluded? I think that's
Just
the next
double,
item.
triple checking.
I think that's the next item on our agenda.
There's no such thing as the next item on the agenda because we've been all over the show so far. I think the next, yeah. We are now completed the public agenda, so we'll go into public excluded.
I so move.
Councillor Hopkins, seconded Councillor Blackler. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, that's carried. Thanks very much to anyone who's been watching this. It's been a bit of a mixed meeting with jumping backwards and forwards through the list, but there's been some good debate along the way. So thank you, councillors, for that, and thanks for staff for the preparation of the agenda and for answering all those questions along the way. So with that, we'll adjourn and we'll have lunch and come back in public excluded after lunch.